Chapter 661. Agreed. Ethan felt a little relieved when he saw Tyranda's changes. He knew that Tyrande had outstanding potential, and as long as she was given the right guidance and support at critical moments, she would be able to exert her own strength. High Priest Dejana, I entrust Tyrande to your care for the time being, Ethan said solemnly as Dejana skillfully mounted the hippogriff and adjusted the reins. As you can see, she is still very young and may not be mature enough in some aspects. I hope you can guide her at critical moments and help her complete her tasks better. During the time he spent with Tyrande, the relationship between Ethan and her had grown beyond mere acquaintance. He truly regarded her as a friend. Every conversation and adventure they shared made Ethan more deeply aware of the unique charm of this young girl. Although Ethan, in his previous life, knew the history of World of Warcraft well, those characters were always illusory existences across the screen to him. Now, after getting to know these characters personally, he found that they were alive and made him feel alive. In Ethan's eyes, the future High Priest, Tyrande Whisperwind, who was still young now, was selected by Elune without any behind-the-scenes manipulation. Not only did she have an outstanding appearance, but she also possessed a gentle, kind, and innocent heart. Every smile of hers was as warm as sunshine, and every movement revealed pure beauty. She was indeed a heartwarming girl. It was no wonder that brothers Malfurion and Illidan fell in love with her. When they first met, Ethan had planned to remain friends with Tyrande to avoid getting involved in complicated entanglements with Malfurion and Illidan. But as time went by, he found himself becoming more and more attracted to Tyrande, even entertaining the idea of competing with the brothers for her affection. Standing in front of High Priest Dejana, Ethan couldn't help but speak highly of Tyrande. It seems that after accepting Elune's oracle, you also saw the specialness of this girl. Dejana smiled and nodded. I don't need you to tell me. I will do the same. I can see it. She has a special light, a gift from the goddess, and the heavy responsibility she will bear in the future. She needs to grow quickly to cope with the upcoming challenges, so please rest assured, you don't need to tell me. I will try to guide and help her in any way I can. She paused and turned to Ethan and Maiev. At the same time, you must be more careful. This battle is full of unknowns and dangers, but I believe that with Elune's blessing, we will be able to get through it. The Grand Temple of the Moon Goddess, as the headquarters of the Sisters of Elune, was currently busy and orderly preparing. Among the hundreds of priests, only more than 100 combat priests would participate in this battle. The rest of the priests focused on the practice of auxiliary and healing spells, lacking combat experience. Maiev and Dejana would naturally not let these rookies join the battle. Dozens of hippogriffs in the animal pens let out low neighs. They would be responsible for transporting the priests out of the city in batches. If counted according to the number, they would have to fly at least 3 or 4 times to transport all the priests out. Fortunately, these priestesses were very light, so there was no problem if 3 of them rode together. High Priest Dejana stood in front of the temple, watching the priests mount the hippogriffs one by one, silently praying in her heart that they could return safely. Seeing that High Priest Dejana and the priests were all ready for battle, Maiev took a deep breath and gently wiped the remaining blood on the moon wheel with her sleeve. She glanced sideways at Ethan standing aside and saw that he looked carefree, as if he didn't care about the upcoming battle. Maiev frowned slightly, her tone tinged with displeasure, masking a deep-seated worry. Let me ask you one last time. Are you sure you want to fight with us? This is not child's play. You may lose your life. Of course, Ethan said, his attitude unwavering. He simply nodded. I'm sure, Maiev. Let's go. Humph. Don't expect me to save you if you encounter danger on the battlefield, Maiev retorted. Despite her words, it was hard to tell what she truly felt. In her mind, she held Ethan in high regard. Regardless of his attitude, he had the courage to stand up and fight alongside them, a trait she admired. Maiev turned towards the animal pen and pulled out a black lightsaber. Mounting the creature, she raised the moon wheel above her head and shouted, Sisters, we must attract enough attention for the retreat of the High Priest and other sisters. Charge with me. Yes, for Elune. The battle priests responded in unison, riding their lightsabers and rushing down the mountain road. High Priest Dejana directed the priests to control the hippogriffs into the air, preparing to take advantage of the battle priest's distraction to evacuate at any moment. The faster they evacuated, the safer their fighting companions would be. Tyrande, riding her own hippogriff beside Tana, clasped her hands in front of her chest, closed her eyes tightly, and silently prayed, "Alun, may you bless Ethan and the sisters to break through the siege smoothly and return safely." At the hidden checkpoints at the foot of the mountain, the moon guards were already prepared. Their figures blended into the night as a slack, merging seamlessly with the surrounding natural environment. Nearly 200 battle mages had gathered, using their arcane magic to skillfully alter the terrain. At the entrance of the mountain pass, a thick earth wall rose out of thin air, standing indestructibly across the center of the passage. The leader, a male night elf with striking purple hair and a prominent scar at the corner of his eye, a mark left by a battle with a troll, stood behind the earth wall. His sharp eyes pierced through the dust, staring at the top of the mountain road where rising dust and speeding figures could be vaguely seen. "They're coming," he shouted, announcing bravely. "According to the order of Queen Ashara, we must not let these moon god priests break out. This is the honor and mission of our moon guards." He turned and gave an order to the team behind him. "Prepare for the air team. The Hippogriff Knights may launch a surprise attack from the air, and we must be ready to respond at any time." "Yes," the guards responded in unison, their voices echoing through the valley. The commander took a deep breath, tightening his grip on his ornate staff and one-handed sword. These weapons were not only his tools for battle, but also symbols of his faith. He stared at the gradually clearing dust on the mountain road, silently reciting his vow to fight. "Come on," he growled. "In the name of the Moon Guard, we must stop you here, for the glory of Ashara and for the future of the Night Elves." Chapter 662, The Split of the Night Elves. In the Society of the Night Elves, arcane mastery is regarded as a noble pursuit. Whether they are civilians or nobles, as long as they possess certain arcane talents, they can apply to join the Moon Guard. However, within this elite army of mages, the upper elves always dominate. The reason is simple: the monopoly on knowledge. Ordinary civilians have few opportunities to come into contact with the mysterious well of eternity and esoteric arcane knowledge, making it difficult for them to walk the arcane path. Individuals like Illidan, who was born a commoner but relied on outstanding talent and hard work to climb the ranks of the Moon Guard and achieve a high position, are rare. His achievements are unlikely to be replicated even in 800 years. Consequently, the upper elves began to rely on their nobility and developed a strong sense of superiority over ordinary night elf civilians. They were eager to maintain their privileged status forever and enjoy the awe and worship of the civilians. This kind of social stratification is not unique to Azeroth in the War of the Ancients. It is common in Blue Star, in Teyvat, in the Koprulu sector, in ancient times, in modern times, and among nobles and upper-class people in all eras and worlds. Once the lower class, untouchables, show signs of counterattack, these privileged classes, who usually have internal disputes, will immediately unite to protect their vested interests. This is where the conflict between the two major classes of the Dark Knight Empire arises. The upper elves insist that the status of mages, or arcane nobles, should be equal to that of moon priests, much higher than the lower-level commoners. This concept has been reinforced by the belief in the moon god that has existed since the rise of the night elves, becoming a powerful weapon for the high-level elves to legitimize themselves. However, this class solidification and social injustice also intensified the internal conflicts of night elf society, laying the groundwork for future changes. When Cenarius introduced the ways of the Druid to night elf society, he opened up a new path of power for ordinary civilians. The way of nature and harmony taught by this great teacher made the common people feel unprecedented power and freedom. Under the unremitting preaching of Malfurion, the Archdruid, the Druid sect has grown rapidly in recent years, and more civilians have joined their ranks. These new Druids found their place in the embrace of nature. They learned to live in harmony with nature and absorb its power. With the rise of civilian power, the authority of the nobility was naturally challenged. According to Tyrande, in recent decades, there have been numerous instances of druids resisting the harsh rule of lords. They were no longer willing to endure the oppression and exploitation of the nobles, but bravely stood up to safeguard justice and fairness. As the pinnacle of all nobles and the true spokesperson of aristocratic politics, Queen Ashara naturally heard the demands of her subjects. However, Cenarius is backed by the holy mountain of Hyjal, where the demigods gather. In front of these representatives of natural forces, even a powerful person like Ashara does not dare to act rashly. In this stalemate, the contradictions are deepening day by day, and a storm is brewing. Under Ashara's forbearance, the conflicts are intensifying. The upper elves felt an unprecedented crisis. They discovered to their horror that their authority was being challenged by civilian forces. In order to maintain their status, they intensified their management of territorial affairs, even resorting to more severe measures. However, this approach provoked a stronger backlash from civilian forces. At this critical moment, the Highborn Elves made a breakthrough in their in-depth research on the use of arcane magic. Under the guidance of Chief Advisor Xavius, the Highborn Elves gathered near the Well of Eternity, attempting to harness its power to explore unknown territories. However, they did not anticipate that this act would inadvertently connect them to the twisting nether, bringing them into contact with the Burning Legion. Sargeras, the Dark Titan who had long been eyeing Azeroth, sensed this opportunity. He was secretly pleased, as these ignorant and fearless Highborn Elves had just fallen into his trap. Sargeras decided to employ the same deceitful tactic that had ensnared the three giants of the Eridar. Disguising himself as a noble bronze titan, he extended a tempting offer to Ashara and the upper echelon of elves. In the past, even wise figures like Kil'jaeden and Archimonde had failed to see through Sargeras' ruse, resulting in most of the Eridar clan becoming minions of the Burning Legion. Their homeland, Argus, was destroyed and transformed into the Legion's headquarters. Only the prophet Velen, with the aid of the holy light creature Naru, led a small number of Eridar to escape their fate, eventually evolving into the Draenei. Now, Queen Ashara and the Highborn were on a similar path. Driven by a desire for immense power and supreme authority, Queen Ashara felt an inexplicable excitement upon hearing Sargeras' offer. She envisioned herself at the pinnacle of power, becoming an unchallengeable entity. Consequently, she developed a keen interest in these so-called gods. The Highborn Elves also harbored sinister intentions. They believed that Sargeras' arrival was their chance to re-establish the aristocratic order. They were eager to use the power of this god envoy to consolidate their position and suppress the rising civilian forces. Despite their hidden agendas, both sides quickly reached a consensus. Queen Ashara decided to partially open the Well of Eternity, allowing the demons of the Burning Legion to enter Azeroth on a limited scale. This decision cast a heavy shadow over the continent's future, heralding an unprecedented disaster. The initial demons who entered Azeroth strictly followed Sargeras' orders. Despite their immense power, these demons displayed unusual restraint when dealing with creatures they considered insignificant, even willing to obey the commands of the Highborn to some extent. Following the instructions of the high-level elves, they carried out precise and bloody suppression of the more rebellious civilian forces. This crackdown was swift and effective, much to the satisfaction of Ashara and the Highborn. With Queen Ashara's tacit approval, the Highborn began using the power of the Well of Eternity to summon more demon lords into Azeroth. These powerful demon lords bolstered the Burning Legion's strength on the continent. However, as the situation evolved, the demons gradually revealed their true nature. They grew increasingly unruly, no longer content to follow the orders of the high-level elves, and even began to turn against their hosts. While they maintained a semblance of respect for Ashara, the queen with formidable arcane power, they showed their true colors when dealing with other Highborn. In the eyes of the demons, the powerful Ashara had the potential to become another giant of the Legion, akin to Kil'jaeden and Archimonde. As for the Highborn elves, they were regarded as mere ants. Within the upper echelons of Night Elf society, some rational voices began to emerge. These individuals no longer blindly followed the Burning Legion, but started to reevaluate the demons they once revered as angels. Elisande, the great magister of Suramar, stood out as a leading rational representative. From the heights of Suramar city, she began to question the path they were on. Overlooking the surrounding land, eroded by evil energy, she witnessed firsthand the atrocities committed by the Burning Legion around Suramar. Her heart filled with doubts and uneasiness. She began to question the true motives of these demons, fearing that they did not prioritize the interests of the Highborn above all else. To verify her suspicions, Elisande began to investigate secretly. She dispatched her magisters to infiltrate the demons' camp to gather her intelligence and evidence. After a period of arduous effort, she finally obtained conclusive information, proving that the Burning Legion was not as friendly and obedient as they appeared. Therefore, Elisande decided to speak to Queen Azshara and warn her of the threat posed by the Burning Legion. She prepared a detailed report outlining the evil deeds of the demons and their true intentions. However, the report eventually fell into the hands of Chief Consultant Xavius. Xavius scorned Elisande's report, believing it to be an alarmist attempt to undermine the cooperative relationship between the Highborn and the Burning Legion. Consequently, he suppressed the report and did not allow Queen Azshara to see it. In fact, even if the Queen had seen the report, her fanatical pursuit of power would have likely led her to disregard Elisande's warnings. Elisande was disappointed and angry when her appeal went unanswered. She realized that if the true nature of the demons could not be revealed in time, the future of the Highborn would be in jeopardy. She made a resolute decision. Suramar city would no longer participate in the dangerous dealings between the demons and the Queen. Under Elisande's orders, the magisters of Suramar began to take action. They utilized many artifacts unearthed over the years, channeling their power to launch a fierce attack on the fell portals near Suramar. With bursts of roars and explosions, the portals were destroyed one by one, cutting off the demons' access to Azeroth. To protect the safety of Suramar city, Elisande used the power of the Eye of Aman'Thul, the Pillar of Creation, to create a source of magic called the Night Well. This well contained powerful energy and could provide a steady stream of magical support for Suramar city. Simultaneously, Elisande also constructed a solid barrier around the inner city of Suramar, completely separating the inner and outer cities. In this way, while the civilians in the outer city of Suramar were slaughtered by demons, the high elves in the inner city of Suramar were able to survive. They hid in the haven created by the Grand Magister and lived a peaceful and comfortable life. However, this peaceful existence came at a heavy price. They had to be completely isolated from other tribesmen, becoming an isolated island on the continent of Azeroth. Chapter 663, Wild Magic. People like Elisande are not alone, and the Highborn of Suramar are not the only ones who have doubts about the actions of the Burning Legion. In La Salraza, far away from Suramar, there is also a sober observer. He is the Moonguard Major, Madrak Sterai. The Sterai family is a noble lineage that enjoys a high reputation in Night Elf society. The family's glory and inheritance have spanned a long time, and its bloodline can be found in every corner of the Dark Knight Empire. In Suramar, Distel Sterai, as the deputy of the resistance leader Lord Ravencrest, heroically led the tribe to resist foreign enemies, and his name became the pride of the Sterai family. Because of Distel's involvement in the resistance, Madrak suffered cold looks and ridicule in the upper elf circles. They were regarded as outliers in the family and were ostracized by their colleagues, unable to integrate into the court that was full of hypocrisy and intrigue. Eventually, Madrak was sent to the remote La Salraza to look after the moon priests. For him, this task was undoubtedly a form of exile from upper elf society. However, it was this isolation and loneliness that gave Madrak the opportunity to re-examine the so-called God's messenger. He stayed away from the blind worship and praise of Zin Ashari and began to observe the demons who were revered as angels with a more objective and calm eye. There are no divine envoys at all, Madrak muttered silently to himself. These cruel demons are not here for the bright future of the Queen and the upper elves. They have other ulterior motives. His suspicion was not groundless, but based on his in-depth observation and thinking about the demon's behavior. Despite the growing doubts in his heart, Madrak did not forget his responsibilities. As the commander of the Moonguard Division, he was well aware of his heavy responsibilities. When the battle priests of the Sisterhood launched an attack, he resolutely stood at the forefront, using his actions to demonstrate his loyalty to Queen Ashara. "Front row battle mages, listen to my order," Madrak shouted loudly, his voice echoing on the battlefield. "Be prepared to resist impact and avoid stray arrows. Immediately activate magic shields and protective spells specialized in each school to provide protection for those in the rear. Companions, build a strong line of defense." "Yes," the battle mages responded in unison. They acted quickly, and round or square magic lights flashed on them, forming translucent magic barriers. At the front of the queue of battle priests, a silver-haired priestess galloped over on a pure black night saber. She held a sharp moon disk in her hand, and the moonlight shone on her body, reflecting her cold and resolute face. Although her appearance was as picturesque and as beautiful as a fairy from the Moon Palace, the strong fighting spirit and murderous aura emanating from her prevented Madrak from being careless in the slightest. "Is she Maya of Shadowsong?" Madrak stared closely at the silver-haired priestess, secretly guessing in his heart. The momentum of taking the lead and the determination to move forward are indeed worthy of being the leader of the fighting priests. "Today, let me come and meet you." At this moment, the archers from both sides started a fierce confrontation. The light of spells and the cold gleam of arrows intertwined in the air, and the sounds of explosions and arrows piercing the air came one after another. Maya of Shadowsong snorted coldly, grasped the moon wheel tightly, and jumped up from the back of the night saber, moving across the battlefield like lightning. The moon wheel in her hand shone with a faint black light, containing terrifying shadow power. At the same time, Madrak also waved a one-handed long sword, burning with flames, and faced her without showing any signs of weakness. Clang! A loud sound of metal clashing echoed, and the recoil generated by the collision of two different forces shook the surrounding air and twisted it. Behind Maiev, Ethan felt a strong gust of wind blowing against his face, even pushing his hair back. "Is the opening this intense?" Ethan wondered to himself. "It seems I can't be lazy anymore. I have to give it my all." Although Ethan had lived in the peaceful world of Harry Potter for a long time, he was not unfamiliar with riding or handling a lightsaber. As a renowned Quidditch master, he could ride at speeds of hundreds of kilometers per hour. If he could fly on a broomstick in the sky, he wouldn't be afraid of riding a lightsaber. He had similar experiences in the Harry Potter world. While there were no creatures like lightsabers, magical beings such as two-tailed cats and sphinxes provided him with comparable riding experiences. Both being feline, the two-tailed cat was agile and strong, while the sphinx's lion body was powerful, making the sensation of riding them similar to that of a lightsaber. However, as a druid, Ethan did not need to engage in close combat like the Luna priests. His fighting style was far more subtle and complex than simply charging into battle. While the priestesses drove their mounts, waving moon discs and moon blades, and shouting war cries as they rushed into the moon guard's position, Ethan controlled his mount, lightly turning its direction and circling the enemy's lines leisurely. At the same time, Ethan stretched out his hands, pointed at the army ahead, and began to manipulate the surrounding natural elements. "Let's try this first," he whispered to himself. His hands seemed to contain infinite energy as he slowly raised them from bottom to top. The next moment, a small vibration emanated from beneath the solid defensive position constructed by the moon guards, as if the earth itself was groaning. Immediately afterward, a large number of thorns, larger and thicker than the usual summoned vines, erupted from the ground. They twisted and struggled, carrying the power to destroy everything in their path. Before the moon god priests could be intercepted by the earth wall, this magically created roadblock was destroyed step by step. A playful smile appeared on Ethan's lips. "Although tying up a magical boy is a bit unsightly, I still want you to experience the horror of the tentacles first." His laughter echoed on the battlefield, and the thorns, like his tentacles, turned the moon guard's position upside down. This was Ethan's first time in Azeroth, fully unleashing the power of druid magic. He deeply felt the indescribable and powerful natural force bred in this land. Under his call, the thorny vines that erupted from the ground seemed to have life, twisting like wild beasts waving their claws crazily in a guarding formation. Ethan stood at a distance, trying hard to control these wild vines, but the feedback he received was that he was so powerless. Although the power within his body could perfectly execute his orders, once these powers left his body and drove the growth of vines, they became elusive and difficult to control accurately. These extremely aggressive vines seemed to have a will of their own, launching fierce attacks on all living creatures around them indiscriminately. Ethan could barely maintain control of the vines to prevent them from inadvertently injuring Maev's battle priests. Ah! The scream of a moon guard pierced the tranquility of the air. His ankles were tightly wrapped around a thick vine, and his body was thrown high before hitting the ground heavily. He struggled, trying to cast spells in the air to break free, but failed several times in a row. The sharp thorns on the vines pierced his calf, and the vicious juice quickly spread through his body. The guard's face contorted in pain, his eyes wide open, filled with fear and despair. He felt as if his body was being burned by fire, with every nerve twitching violently. To make matters worse, he found that after, he was poisoned. Every time he tried to cast a spell, the arcane energy in his body would become extremely violent, causing inexplicable fluctuations. This directly prevented the Moon Guard from condensing stable, arcane energy, let alone casting a complete spell. While Ethan was trying to adapt to the wild force of nature and control the movement of the vines, an interested smile appeared on his face. He rubbed his chin, feeling the effect of casting the spell in this situation, and his heart was filled with anticipation. Interesting, he murmured to himself. I didn't expect that just using druid spells to summon vines would have such a powerful effect. Summoning vines to fight is one of the combat skills that all druids must learn. It represents the application of the power of nature to the manipulation of plants. From the most basic level 1, tangled roots, to level 3 brambles, level 4, poison ivy, level 5, blood ivy, and beyond, this series of spells are all about druids harnessing the power of nature. However, this direct manipulation of plants is not the only way a druid can control them. Druids also have a more magical way of fighting, known as activation. Through activation spells, druids can give plants vitality similar to animals, allowing them to fight independently. This fighting method is called summoning trance in World of Warcraft. But in fact, its applications go far beyond that. Ethan's powerful fighting partners, such as Dryad and Lacey, are all products of this spell. In addition to vine manipulation, which Ethan has already mastered, druid spells have more diverse development directions. Among them, there is a school that manipulates starlight and flames. The spells of this school are, to a certain extent, similar to the wizard's conjuration and evocation systems. Druids can also summon blazing fire, but their methods are completely different. They use the power of nature to resonate with the fire element, tame it, and use it for themselves. When the flame hits the target, it not only causes instant damage, but also makes the enemy struggle in pain, continuing to be tortured by the flame through the attached burning effect. The spells of this genre start from the first level, Moon Fire Spell. As druids deepen their understanding of the power of nature, they can master more powerful fire spells. The second level, Fire Sphere, can create a blazing fireball, slamming it at the enemy and leaving a burning path along the way. The fourth level, Flame Strike, and the fifth level, Firewall, can create a sea of fire on the battlefield, leaving the enemy with nowhere to escape. When the power of the druids reaches its peak, they can even cast the 8th level, Sunfire Explosion, and the 9th level, Star Falling. These two spells are powerful enough to destroy all obstacles and crush all enemies with stars and fire. In addition, druids also have a school that specializes in wilderness transformation. The Raptor Druids and Claw Druids in World of Warcraft are both outstanding representatives of this school. They gain the ability to transform into various ferocious beasts, gaining powerful strength and speed, as well as various special powers. Their transformation is not only a change in form, but also a sublimation of power. In the state of wilderness transformation, they can tear apart their enemies and make all who dare to challenge them pay a heavy price. Of course, in the world of druid magic, there is also a school that specializes in healing. Druids of this school are adept at using the power of nature to heal wounds and dispel diseases. Their presence can often bring hope of life to their teammates. Chapter 664, Breakthrough on the Battlefield. Although Ethan had never witnessed the fighting style of the druids in this world, he had gained a deeper understanding of Malfurion's combat techniques through conversations with Tyrande. He found many similarities between the combat skills of the druids in this world and the druid spells he had mastered. This made him even more convinced that he could learn from the druid system of this world, quickly improve his own strength, become a true druid master, and master the ultimate secret of the power of nature. At this time, the Chinese army position guarded by the moon had been disrupted by the thorn vines summoned by Ethan. The originally uniformed team was entangled by vines growing wantonly. The soldiers struggled in horror, trying to escape from these sudden restraints. Their formation was gone, replaced by chaos and panic. Major Madrak had been fighting with Maiev on the front of the battlefield, but at this moment, he suddenly noticed something strange behind him. He hurriedly looked back and saw that his Chinese army position had been submerged by vines, and the soldiers were locked in a bitter battle. Madrak's heart tightened, knowing that the situation was not good, and immediately ordered his subordinates to use fire element spells to clear out these strange vines of unknown origin. The moon guards quickly gathered together, the staffs in their hands shining with fiery red light. Following Madrak's order, fireball, pyrotechnic, hot ray, all kinds of fire spells poured out like a torrential rain, shrouding those thorns and vines in a sea of fire. Although Ethan's druid spells are greatly more effective under the wild power of nature, the essence of vines is plants after all. Faced with the moon guardians, concentrated firepower, and large-scale fire spells to clear the area, the thorn vines were quickly burned, curling up and blackening. Ethan, however, didn't care about the vine's demise. From the beginning, he had no hope of annihilating all the enemies with his own magic. His main purpose was just to clear the way for his teammates and destroy the enemy's formation. At this moment, Ethan was secretly satisfied when he saw that the formation of the moon guards had been completely disrupted. Even in a world where magic exists, war still needs to follow some basic laws of war, one of which is to maintain formation. Especially when the infantry is fighting against the cavalry, losing the formation means that the army's command is out of control and its organizational power is lost. Such an army can easily be divided, surrounded, and defeated by the enemy. Ethan's unexpected spell successfully caused such an effect, creating an excellent opportunity for Maiev's battle priests to rush into the formation. Major Madrak looked at the messy position and the soldiers in chaos, his heart filled with helplessness and anger. He knew that this battle had become extremely difficult. Ethan stood not far away and watched all this with a faint smile on his face. He knew that half of the battle was won, and it was up to Maiev's battle priests to seize this opportunity to deliver a fatal blow to the enemy. Taking advantage of Major Madrak's retreat to take command of the situation, Maiev moved the cloak behind her, gathered the power of Shadow, and activated Shadow Step to forcefully enter the stealth state. Her figure was like a ghost, moving quickly across the battlefield, silently bypassing the enemy's defense line, and heading straight towards the Moon Guard's rear position. Although Maiev today is more mature and stable than Tyrande, she still looks immature compared to her 10,000 years from now. However, even in this way, she has become the leader of the battle priests of the Sisters of Elune. Her strength is self-evident. The mages of the Moon Guard were concentrating on the battle ahead, but suddenly felt a chill coming over them. They looked back, subconsciously, only to see a black shadow flash past, followed by a burst of severe pain. Before Ven had a chance to react, Maiev had already struck. Before they had time to react, the Moon Guards were knocked to the ground by Maiev, losing their ability to fight. This is what happens when a mage is approached by a powerful rogue. Considering that the Moon Guards had previously adhered to the rules, Maiev did not deal harshly with them. She deliberately used her skills to avoid vital points and attacked with the back of her blade, injuring and knocking the mages unconscious, rendering them temporarily unable to participate in the battle. Her movements were swift and decisive, leaving no opportunity for the enemy to counterattack. The leader took the lead and charged into the enemy formation, with the priestesses riding lightsabers following Maiev with high morale. They waved their weapons and let out loud shouts, sweeping in like a violent storm. The Moon Guards were caught off guard by this sudden attack, and their formation collapsed instantly. Before the battle began, Major Madrak had instructed the Moon Guards to cast spells to create a barrier. The original plan was to use this position to block the oncoming cavalry and force them into positional warfare. In such a battle, the cavalry would lose their most important speed advantage and be forced into the familiar battle rhythm of the Moon Guard. However, just as Major Madrak prepared for the cavalry charge, Ethan unexpectedly released vines. These vines seemed to be alive, emerging from the ground and instantly disintegrating the solid earth wall. The mage troops, responsible for the most important output of firepower, were thrown into chaos by these tentacle-like vines, and their originally neat formation was completely disrupted. Major Madrak's plan was completely disrupted, and he had to temporarily abandon the defense against the enemy's frontal impact to concentrate his firepower on eliminating these troubles. He loudly ordered his men, trying to maintain order on the battlefield. However, at this critical moment, Maiev, who was adept at exploiting the enemy's weaknesses, suddenly launched an attack. She rushed into the mage team like a tiger, almost single-handedly disrupting their combat rhythm. Her attacks were swift and precise, leaving the mages no time to provide fire support for the battle ahead. As the saying goes, misfortunes never come alone. When Ethan's vines were reduced to ashes in the blazing flames, he was undeterred. He quickly changed his battle strategy. Closing his eyes, he relied on his excellent perception to have a panoramic view of the entire battlefield. Then, he identified the Moon Guards, who performed particularly well, and launched a fatal blow with Flame Strike. Like thorns and vines, the Flame Strike became even more powerful under the catalysis of wild natural power. The already blazing flame intensified, making Ethan want to shout, "I will light the sea on fire!" Once caught by these flames falling from the sky, the fiery tongues of fire would tightly wrap around the target, causing severe physical pain and mental torture. Major Madrak still stood at the forefront, leading by example. He waved his sword and commanded his soldiers to resist tenaciously. However, under the joint attack of Ethan and Maiev, the Moon Guards were overwhelmed and could no longer stop the fierce attack of the Nightsaber cavalry. As Maiev let out a battle cry, her signature large-scale sword fan suddenly exploded at the enemy's position. The bright sword light was like a star cutting through the dark night. The last arcane barrier built by the Moon Guard collapsed instantly in the face of this powerful force. The magicians had lost their ability to resist, and their spells could no longer be maintained. Upon seeing this, Major Madrak immediately tried to break away from the battle and organize the Moon Guards to rebuild their defenses. Without the barrier, however, their efforts seemed futile. The mage army's defenses were crumbling, unable to withstand the enemy's relentless assault. Maiev, who had been closely monitoring the battlefield, immediately used her first skill to teleport away from her current position. 2 moon discs made of pure energy flew from her hands, slicing through the air with a howling wind, aimed directly at the figure still resolutely directing the battle. Major Madrak. Clang! Clang! Major Madrak swung his arcane-imbued longsword, deflecting the 2 energy moon discs. Despite his successful defense, his face showed no sign of triumph, only frustration. He had assessed the situation and knew that the Moon Guards could no longer halt the enemy's advance. They had lost this battle. While Ethan, Maiev, and others fought fiercely on the front lines, Tyrande quietly led another team into action. Thanks to her previous in-depth reconnaissance of the terrain near Lasal Raza with Ethan, she skillfully guided High Priest Dejana and the first group of Sisterhood priests around the edge of the main battlefield. Under Tyrande's guidance, the Hippogriff herd finally landed in a small forest less than a kilometer from the main battlefield. High Priest Dejana organized the successful escape of the priestesses in the woods, while Tyrande led a large number of hippogriffs back into the air, swiftly flying towards the city to pick up the next wave of evacuees. Chapter 665. The Devil Arrives. However, just as the last group of priestesses rode hippogriffs and approached the meeting point, something unexpected happened. In the clear night sky, several meteorites with green tail flames appeared out of thin air. They carried an aura of destruction and headed straight for the hippogriff herd. Tyrande and the others had no time to react before the meteorites crashed into the hippogriffs. Several hippogriffs were unable to dodge and were instantly hit by the green flames. Their wings caught fire, and they made shrill whines, spinning and rolling in midair. The priestesses riding them were thrown off, letting out desperate screams as they plummeted to the ground. At the same time, the battle priests led by Maiev had just broken through the Moon Guard's defense. They were preparing to pursue their victory when they saw countless little bats making shrill screams, gathering from all directions. These bats rotated rapidly around Major Madrak, gradually forming the image of a tall demon with curved horns and wide, fleshy wings. The demon's eyes flashed with evil light. It opened its bloody mouth and let out a deafening roar, which seemed to swallow up the entire battlefield. "Ha!" the demon sneered, the evil green light in its eyes sweeping across the Moon Guards contemptuously. It snorted coldly, its voice full of disdain and ridicule. "Trash! You have failed Queen Ashara's expectations and trust." When Major Madrak heard this, a complicated look flashed in his eyes. His heart was filled with disgust for this demon, but on the surface, he had to pretend to be in awe. He lowered his head slightly, trying to hide his emotions, and at the same time admitted his mistake to the demon. "Lord Tichondrius, I am ashamed. We did not complete the task assigned to us by Her Majesty the Queen." "Enough." The demon waved its sharp claws at Madrak impatiently, interrupting his words. "I didn't have high expectations for you wastes. Step back. Let me help you clean up this mess." At this moment, the battle priests had broken through the defense line arranged by the Moon Guards and were unstoppable. However, demon guards suddenly appeared from all around, blocking their way forward. These demon guards were tall, with ferocious faces, and exuded a strong, evil aura. Maiev glanced sideways at the sisters who had fallen from the air to the ground, her eyes filled with anger and grief. Only a few of them had used the levitation technique in time and survived. The remaining dozen priests, due to lack of actual combat experience, all fell helplessly in a pool of blood, losing signs of life. Their sacrifice made Maiev heartbroken. She gritted her teeth tightly and stared at the demon blocking her way with burning eyes, feeling both angry and puzzled. Why did the Burning Legion appear here? Ethan also narrowed his eyes and looked solemnly at the bat-like demon leader. His heart was full of doubts, but he remained calm and analyzed the current situation. "If I'm not wrong," Ethan said slowly, "the Burning Legion was worried about the Moon Guard's garrison from the beginning, so they specially arranged a troop to secretly monitor them near the Moon Guard." He carefully observed the partial division of the Burning Legion and found that their number was not large. After a rough glance and calculation, he estimated that this force only had about 100 ground troops of various types, plus 7 or 8 medium-sized hellfires that had been dropped from the sky before. Despite this, the presence of these demons still posed a huge threat to the Sisterhood members on the battlefield. "The most troublesome thing is their leader, who is a feared devil," Ethan said secretly. "It is said that he is very powerful and has weird magical abilities. We must deal with him carefully, otherwise the consequences will be disastrous." Ethan's role as a border bumpkin prevented him from revealing his intimate knowledge of the enemy to Maiev and the other battle priests. He didn't know much about the Dreadlord. His creature, also known as Nathrism, is one of the first races in the Twisting Nether to be recognized as demons. They are cruel and cunning by nature, adept at using shadow and death spells to control illusions and confuse their targets with sweet words. They are not skilled in frontal combat and are not considered powerful warriors among the Burning Legion. However, Their true terror lies in their ability to create suspicion and distrust within the enemy's stable rear, undermining the enemy's determination and will to resist the Burning Legion. Even Sargeras, the leader of the Burning Legion, didn't know that the Dreadlords were essentially shadow creatures, not real demons. They came from Sargeras's true enemies, the Lords of the Void, who had sent them to infiltrate the Burning Legion. Perhaps only such cunning creatures could work as undercover agents right under Sargeras's nose. The Moon Guard commander just now, he seemed to call the Dreadlord Tichondrius. Ethan's heart stirred as he slowly walked towards Maiev, his eyes fixed on the taunting Dreadlord. He thought to himself, if that demon is really Tichondrius, it will be difficult for us to escape from this group of demons. Tichondrius's name sent waves through Ethan's mind. He clearly remembered that the leader of the Nathrazim was the right-hand deputy of Kil'jaeden the Deceiver, one of the 3 giants of the Burning Legion. Although in terms of combat ability, Tichondrius might not compare to Manaroth, the vanguard general under Archimonde the Defiler. When it came to conspiracy and infiltration behind enemy lines, not even 10 Manaroths could match his cunning. The moment he saw the Dreadlord appear, Ethan began to wonder if there was a deeper plot behind the sudden appearance of the Dreadlord. Why was he hiding and spying? Was all this a trick on his part? However, the reality was even more troublesome. The battle priests led by Maiev and the main force led by High Priestess Dejana failed to successfully rendezvous, and the 2 sides were separated by a group of strong demon guards. This made their situation even more dangerous, as they could be ambushed by the demon army at any time. The priests of La Salaza had never experienced such a bloody scene. The tragic death of their sisters left them pale with shock. Fear rendered them speechless, each feeling as if their souls were tightly gripped by cold hands, unable to break free. Fortunately, Ethan foresaw this and deliberately kept Tyrande with them, who had experienced war. In this situation, only Tyrande remained calm. In this desperate situation, facing the sudden enemy, she was the first to break the silence, loudly urging and encouraging the priests to start again. Her voice was like morning bells and evening drums, awakening the fearful priests. They supported each other, taking heavy steps, and landed in the dense woods one by one in shock to join the main force. Seeing that the priests were safe, Maiev breathed a sigh of relief, and her tense nerves relaxed a little. However, if these demons were not dealt with, the danger would not truly be far away. With a heavy muffled sound, the hellfires that hit the ground slowly crawled out of the huge pit, their bodies emitting green and hot flames, igniting everything around them. Under the command of Tichondrius, these hellfires approached Ethan and Maiev, threatening their lives. Facing this dangerous situation, Ethan was not without countermeasures in mind. His arcane magic was powerful enough to deal with these demons. However, in order to hide his identity, he was unable to cast these spells at all. Although his attainments in druid magic were not shallow, they were far inferior to his arcane magic. Compared to the current crisis, he seemed a little inadequate. Therefore, Ethan could only suppress his inner worries and look for ways to break the situation, leveraging his resources wisely. Maiev quickly turned her head and glanced at the battle priests with her sharp eyes. She saw their tired eyes and felt the fear and uneasiness in their hearts. She hesitated slightly, but quickly made a decision. Change direction. Maev's voice was firm, instilling courage in every fighting priest. To break through the demon's defense, we must first meet up with the high priests. We cannot leave them behind. Yes! The battle priests responded in unison, Maev's sudden decision becoming their backbone. They quickly adjusted their formation and prepared to attack the demon's defense line. Meanwhile, support for the god envoy within the Moon Guard had become polarized. Some cheered and gathered around Tichondrius, trying their best to please this powerful demon leader. Their faces were full of flattery and hypocrisy, as if they had completely forgotten their responsibilities and missions. The other part of the Moon Guards stayed in place with complicated expressions. They, including Commander Madrak, were all warriors with rich combat experience and keen insight. They looked at the people surrounding Tichondrius, filled with doubts and uneasiness. Chapter 6666, Hope of Breaking the Situation. Madrak frowned, sensing something was amiss. Until now, they had no idea that a demon army was nearby. What did this mean? The Burning Legion didn't regard these foreign troops as a threat at all, using them merely as cannon fodder and bait to weaken the Sisters of Elune. Meanwhile, Tichondrius led his own demon army, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The realization sent a chill down Madrak's spine. One of the moon guards, who still looked somewhat youthful, walked heavily to Madrak's side, his eyes filled with reluctance and confusion. "Major, do we really have to?" he began, his voice trembling. Madrak turned to him, looking deeply into his eyes before sighing softly. "I understand what you mean. There's no need to say more." The young moon guard fell silent for a moment, then nodded and stepped aside. Madrak glanced at Tichondrius, who stood not far away. The demon, resembling a large bat, stood quietly with his eyes slightly closed, seemingly basking in the noise and adulation around him. However, Madrak could sense a cold indifference and arrogance emanating from him. The praise of the moon guards meant nothing to Tichondrius. "These demons don't take us seriously at all," Madrak thought. "For the glory of the Highborn and the Queen, these are just superficial words." His eyes turned to the moon guards surrounding Tichondrius, his heart filled with disappointment and anger. These deluded companions had lost their beliefs and positions, blinded by the devil's sweet words, forgetting their responsibilities and missions. While Madrak's heart was in turmoil, Maiev had already led her troops into a fierce head-on collision with the Burning Legion. On the battlefield, the Hellfires moved slowly, step by step, making muffled sounds. Their heavy steps seemed to shake the earth. These massive structures of evil energy, composed entirely of flaming hell rocks, possessed immense strength and defense, but moved very slowly. Faced with the threat of these hellfires, Maiev chose not to engage them directly. Instead, she decisively commanded her troops to attack towards the grove to the west, seeking an opportunity to break through. Ethan followed closely among the large troops, silently observing the battle situation around him, without expressing any opinions. However, his eyes were fixed on Tichondrius, trying to glean some useful information from the demon leader. As Ethan stared at Tichondrius, he suddenly felt an unexpected wave of emotions. "Is this an emotion of vigilance and disgust?" Ethan thought. "It wasn't there just now. This emotion appeared suddenly, and it wasn't directed at us, but at those demons." Ethan's eyes lit up, sensing a glimmer of hope to break the situation. He quickly moved his gaze between Tichondrius and Madrak, trying to find a connection between the two. He vaguely realized that he might have discovered a key element to break the situation. These commanders of the Moon Guard seem to have different opinions, Ethan thought. Could it be that they do not fully agree with Tichondrius's command? If that's the case, then I might be able to use this to find a breakthrough in the Burning Legion's defenses. The troops brought by Tichondrius were mainly composed of burly, muscled demon guards. These infantrymen wielded huge two-handed weapons, and every step they took seemed to make the ground tremble. Their powerful physiques and imposing presence were intimidating. Although the Night Elves were known for their excellent physical fitness and agility among all mortal races, at this moment, when they faced these demon guards who were as strong as iron towers, they had to admit their disadvantage. The elves found themselves at an absolute disadvantage in terms of strength. Their famed flexibility and speed seemed to be their only advantage against the formidable enemy before them. However, Maiev was not a general who acted recklessly. She understood that facing such an enemy head-on would be like an egg striking a stone. Therefore, she quickly observed the enemy's movements, seeking exploitable weaknesses in their body shape and actions. "Maintain guerrilla warfare," Maiev ordered loudly. "Don't confront these demons head-on. Use our flexibility and speed to constantly harass and wear them down. Archers, prepare to fire. Volley!" As Maiev's order was issued, the elves swiftly took action. They kept a certain distance, rode night sabers, and utilized their cavalry to launch guerrilla attacks around the demon guards. The archers took the opportunity to draw their bows, nock arrows, and aim at the exposed weaknesses of the demons, firing accurately. For a moment, arrows rained down on the battlefield. Although the demon guards were thick-skinned, they could not completely withstand the dense rain of arrows. their formation began to falter, and the night elves seized the opportunity to launch a more aggressive attack. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, Dejana was doing her best to direct the panicked priests to set up defensive formations. However, these priests clearly lacked actual combat experience and systematic military training. Their movements were chaotic and disorderly, making it difficult to follow even simple orders. This rendered Dejana's command less effective and unable to form a solid defense. If High Priest Dejana had not used her prestige and determination to suppress everyone's objections and panic, some of the priests who had witnessed the tragic deaths of their sisters might have fled and given up resistance. Dejana looked around at the chattering and chaotic group of priests with a headache and smiled helplessly. She turned to Tyrande beside her, with a hint of powerlessness in her tone. "Tyrande, I'm afraid we can't count on the fighting power of these sisters." Tyrande was equally concerned about the situation. She looked into the distance and saw hundreds of demon guards advancing in two groups. Some demon guards blocked the impact of Maev's battle priest troops, trying to slow them down and buy time for the other demon guards. The other group of demon guards moved towards the woods in an orderly manner, setting up a defensive formation, apparently planning to launch an attack before they could join forces. "The demon commander seems to be planning to defeat each of us before we can regroup," Tyrande said, her voice filled with deep worry. She stared into the distance with bright eyes while analyzing for Dejana. "Our team is seen by the demons as an easy target." Among these priests who lacked combat training, only Tyrande had experienced battle and understood combat, so only she could assume such a responsibility. High Priest Dejana stood next to Tyrande. After listening to her words, she finally understood the situation, her face full of hesitation. "Hey," she sighed deeply, as if trying to exhale all the weight in her heart with that breath. "In that case," she took out a pendant necklace from the collar of her loose priest robe with a dark blue vertical diamond-shaped gem hanging from it. This gemstone shone with a mysterious light under the moonlight, hinting at the power it contained. "Although I prefer to settle disputes through peaceful means, these demons obviously will not give us a chance to talk," Dejana said firmly, looking up at the bright crescent moon in the night sky. "Elune, please forgive me. In order to protect the sisters behind me, I am destined to be unable to implement your benevolent belief today." As her prayers fell, the atmosphere grew tense, and the battle continued to rage on. Blue light gradually emanated from the gem, enveloping her entire body. Under the shroud of light, High Priest Dejana clasped her hands together and lowered her head in a prayerful gesture. Her voice grew more high-pitched and passionate. "Loving moon goddess, please grant me the power to clear the obstacles on the path of the sisters. Let our enemies witness your great power." As her prayers concluded, a powerful energy burst forth from the gem, shooting straight into the sky. This energy converged into a dazzling beam of light, illuminating the entire night sky. Under the influence of this force, the surrounding air became solemn, as if even time had paused at this moment. High Priest Dejana's body radiated a strong light, and her figure grew taller and more imposing within the glow. She seemed to have transformed into a radiant goddess, standing in the woods, guarding the sisters behind her. Chapter 667. Stars Falling. The selection of each high priest is not directly made by the moon god Elune, but the threshold for this responsibility is extremely high. This threshold is not just about personal strength. After all, as the chief high priest of the moon god, why rely too much on ordinary strength? Under the care of Elune, strength will naturally flow like water, continuously emerging. Ultimately, the real key is the high priest's deep understanding and devout belief in the teachings of the moon god. In this regard, Dejana is undoubtedly the best in the world. Her faith in Elune is so devout that any doubts disappear. Dejana has held the position of high priest of the sisterhood for hundreds of years. She witnessed Queen Ashara personally supervise the construction of the large temple city of Ras Al Raza to show respect to the moon god Elune. At that time, Queen Ashara lived up to her name, a true beacon of light, shining on the entire continent of Azeroth. Dejana also enjoyed supreme glory as the goddess's highest representative in the material world. However, she also witnessed the Queen opening a portal to the twisting nether through the Well of Eternity, introducing the demons of the Burning Legion into the peaceful Azeroth. At that moment, her heart was full of struggle and pain. As the highest representative of the goddess in the material world during peacetime, she was unable to stop it in time due to her own conservatism and indecision. Dejana is well aware of her character shortcomings. Her style tends to be conservative, and sometimes she even appears indecisive. With her status as the High Priest of Elune, if she had firmly opposed Queen Ashara's opening of the portal, perhaps even the Queen, known as the Light of Light, could not completely ignore her opinions. However, she failed to do so, which caused her to fall into self-blame countless times in the dead of night after the Burning Legion revealed its true colors. In recent years, during private gatherings of the sororities and chats after dinner, a name gradually emerged in everyone's conversations: Maiev. Her talent, wit, and bravery made her admired by many sisterhood members, like a torrential river, and Maiev's voice for becoming the High Priest grew louder and louder. How could Dejana, the current High Priest who had gone through many trials and tribulations, not be aware of this undercurrent? She was fully aware and even actively cooperated with this trend, carefully arranging a series of tasks for Maiev. These tasks not only helped Maiev expand her network, but also skyrocketed her reputation among the sisterhood. However, a few years ago, a sudden oracle disrupted this peaceful situation. The supreme moon god Elune appointed Tyrande, a little-known country priest, as the next high priest in the oracle. This news hit Dejana's heart like a bolt from the blue. She never expected that the successor she had personally trained would not be favored by the goddess. She had mixed feelings, but more importantly, she felt deeply helpless. Fortunately, only Dejana knew the content of this oracle. She knew that once the news was leaked, it would cause an uproar and might even plunge the sisterhood into unprecedented chaos. But the oracle of the moon god had to be followed, so Dejana had to change her plan temporarily and train Tyrande. Although Dejana has spared no effort to promote Tyrande in the past few years, and Tyrande's performance in Suramar has won the favor of the goddess and everyone's recognition, her reputation and personal strength in the sisterhood still have a long way to go. The sisterhood was still different from Maiev, with a noticeable gap. Unfortunately, this was God's choice, and it was both irresistible and unchangeable. Dejana could only pray silently in her heart, hoping that Tyrande could grow up quickly and take on this important responsibility. At the same time, she needed to find a way to balance the forces within the sisterhood to ensure that, at this critical moment, everyone could unite and avoid causing trouble. Amid the rapid changes in her mind, High Priest Dejana took a deep breath and concentrated on the artifact in her hand. A layer of light blue, transparent aura gradually emerged around her body, as soft as morning dew, but containing a power that should not be underestimated. This force gently pushed Tyrande, who was close to her, outward, leaving her shocked. The woods in the middle of the night were originally dark, but at this moment they were illuminated by the hazy light as gentle as moonlight around Dejana. Tichondrius, who had been lazily drooping his eyelids, felt this gentle but powerful force, causing the corners of his eyebrows to twitch unconsciously. The demon leader immediately turned his attention to the direction of the grove, feeling an inexplicable uneasiness in his heart. At this moment, Dejana was slowly suspended in midair under the power of the artifact gem. Her hands were raised up, as if embracing the starry sky. Following her movements, countless silver-white stars appeared in midair. They emitted faint light, but also exuded a power that could not be ignored. These stars seemed to have the ability to be precisely guided, and they fell on the heads of all demons within a radius of several kilometers. Each star contained the power of Elune, drawing dazzling tracks in the night sky, as spectacular as a meteor shower. "Feel the power of Elune," Dejana declared loudly, as if pronouncing the death of the demons. "The stars are falling." As her words fell, the power of the stars poured down like a raging torrent, illuminating the woods like daylight. "Wow!" Ethan couldn't help but exclaim at the spectacular sight in front of him. Although there was an insurmountable gap between the picture on the screen and the live broadcast he witnessed, Ethan could not ignore what he saw. If he remembered correctly, the wide-area spell used by High Priest Dejana at this time had a more popular and shocking name among the players of World of Warcraft, Luna Railgun, and it was an enhanced version. Countless meteors of pure energy fell from the sky as densely as dumplings, carrying the power of destruction. Each meteor hit the demons accurately, sending up plumes of green smoke. The demons who were hit screamed in pain. The green smoke coming out of their bodies seemed to be the traces left after being burned by high temperatures, and there was a burning smell in the air. The demon guards raised their huge weapons and waved them randomly in the air. Their eyes were full of panic and despair, trying to reduce the chance of being attacked. However, facing such a dense meteor attack, their resistance was weak and insignificant. On this battlefield that looked like the end of the world, the wails of demons rose and fell, intertwined with the roar of falling meteors, forming a tragic and shocking symphony. The stars falling cast by High Priest Dejana was not an ordinary spell, which could be seen from the reaction of the demons after being hit. Those energy meteors that shone like moonlight with a faint silver light drew beautiful trajectories in the night sky, as if the fingertips of the goddess were dancing gently. Whenever these meteors came into contact with demons, a powerful force erupted, causing huge damage to these palm-to-tooth demons. Ethan witnessed all this and felt an inexplicable excitement in his heart. He recalled what he knew about Elune in his previous life, and a flash of light crossed his mind. Is this the power of the holy light? Although this silver energy was different from the golden holy light in his memory, who can stipulate that the power of light must be embodied in gold? Perhaps this is Elune's unique form of power, and it is she who grants her followers their unique abilities. Interesting, a smile appeared on Ethan's lips as he made new guesses about Elune's power and its manifestations. This true god, revered as the moon god by the night elves, is obviously not as simple as the players imagined. Her existence, even before Ethan traveled through time, remained a perplexing mystery. Although the possibility of Elune being the star soul of Azeroth has been officially ruled out, her existence was still enigmatic. At this moment, Ethan glimpsed some of Elune's secrets through the spells of High Priestess Dejana. Her power at least contains the dual attributes of life and holy light, making it irresistible to demons who master dark energy. Although Ethan was full of curiosity about Elune's power and longed to delve deeper into the moon god's secrets, he knew that the current battle situation did not allow him to be distracted. Amid Maev's urgent shouts, he quickly retracted his thoughts and refocused on the battlefield. Wherever he looked, demons were being smashed by meteors falling from the sky, fleeing in all directions. The once neat and uniform formations instantly collapsed under this high-intensity area attack, scattering chaotically. Although Tichondrius held up a gloomy green protective barrier to block most of the energy meteors that hit him, he seemed to have no intention of helping his soldiers. There is no real camaraderie among demons. Maiev seized this opportunity and led her troops to break through the demons' defense line. Under the rapid advance of the Night Sabers, the combat priest troops broke into the grove where the High Priestess was, like a sharp arrow, and successfully joined the main army. Seeing that the remaining sisters were safe and sound, the joy of victory immediately filled their hearts. Chapter 668, Fighting the Devil. Although Dejana's spellcasting lasted only a few minutes, the number of demon guards led by Tichondrius was reduced by more than half. The remaining demons were all injured, and their overall combat effectiveness was severely compromised. They were now running around the battlefield, no longer as arrogant as before. However, this powerful and foul-mouthed spell came at a price. After finishing the spell, Dejana's face was as pale as paper, and her body was crumbling. If Tyrande hadn't been quick to support her, the High Priest, whose steps were unsteady after landing, would have collapsed to the ground. This highlights another aspect of the problem. When Elune chooses her High Priest, she considers more than just ability and piety. What's more important is the High Priest's adaptability to the power of the Moon God. Although Elune's power is extremely potent and divine, she needs to use her believers as a medium to perfectly cross the phase and descend to the main material plane. However, Believers infused with divine power bear not only the gift of strength, but also a heavy burden. Dejana's adaptability to Elun's power is the strongest among the sisterhood, which is why she can become the high priest. But even after casting the spell for only a few minutes, she is already showing signs of fatigue. At this moment, she was lying in Tyron's arms, her body constantly shaking, obviously suffering from unspeakable pain. Therefore, when believers pray to Elun and she does not appear, it may not be that she is unwilling to respond. She might be hesitating, worried that her divine power would be too strong and push believers to the edge of life in an instant. The reason why Tyrande is valued by Elun is precisely because of her unparalleled strength and adaptability. Dejana could only hold on to the same lunar railgun for a few minutes, but in the original work, Tyrande could cast it for half an hour at a time. Her body seemed to be an endless container, capable of containing and harnessing Elun's majestic power. Not to mention, the future Tyrande is not only frequently directly possessed by Elun, but is also able to fully accept the dark side of Elun's power. When the power of shadow is added to her body, she directly transforms into the Moon Knight god of war and has a fighting experience that is unmatched by mortals. The gap between people is vividly displayed at this moment. When Ethan's eyes fell on the dark blue diamond-shaped gem on Dejana's chest, his eyes narrowed unconsciously, and an inexplicable throbbing surged in his heart. That pendant, could it be the legendary Tears of Elun? He murmured to himself. The Tear of Elun is one of several powerful artifacts known as the Pillars of Creation, along with the Tidestone of Golganeth, the Shield of Agrimar, the Hammer of Khazgoroth, and Amonthul's Eye. Each of them possesses heaven-defying power. However, there are so few manifestations of the Tears of Elun that its true effect remains a mystery. However, Ethan knew that if it could be compared with those heaven-defying artifacts, this seemingly inconspicuous gem must also contain unimaginable power. His eyes wandered back and forth between Dejana and the gem, and his heart was filled with curiosity. With the help of the increased power of Elun's tears, Dejana had just cast a large-scale divine spell that exceeded the limit of her own abilities. At this time, she could barely stand with Tyrande's support. Her face was as pale as paper, and she looked very weak. However, her eyes were still firm and bright, worry for her fellow sisters keeping her from falling. After taking a breath, Dejana raised her head with difficulty to look at Maiev and said in a weak but firm voice, "Maiev, immediately take the sisters to evacuate before the demons can catch their breath." Before she could finish her words, she fainted amidst the exclamations of chaos and evil, so the combination of these two spells was particularly effective against them. Ethan withdrew his gaze from Tichondrius and solemnly reminded the chaotic sisterhood members, "The high priest is right. We are not completely out of danger yet, and we must evacuate as soon as possible." Despite his words, Ethan's eyes never left Tichondrius in the distance. The demon lord stood amidst the battlefield's chaos, his gloomy eyes fixed on them, exuding a strong, malevolent aura. He seemed ready to launch another attack at any moment. Under Ethan's watchful gaze, Tichondrius's mouth twisted into a ferocious grin, making Ethan feel a sense of foreboding. Suddenly, Tichondrius's form twisted and changed in a burst of dark smoke, transforming into countless small bats that filled the sky. In an instant, the bats swooped over the woods where Ethan and the others were hiding, their shrill screams echoing through the trees, creating a terrifying atmosphere. "Ha-ha!" As Lord Kil'jaeden expected, the irrational fanaticism of faith will pose a great obstacle to the Legion's capture of Azeroth. Tichondrius's voice echoed from all directions, as if he were hidden in every corner. "We can't let you reach the front line to boost the morale of the resistance." As his voice faded, he joined his hands together, and a wave of green light burst from his palms, striking towards the group of priests below. The light was mixed with a swarm of disgusting black bugs, flying through the air as if cheering for the devastating attack. High Priest Dejana, deemed the biggest threat by Tichondrius, was at the center of the impact. "Swarm of rotten insects," Tichondrius shouted with a ferocious smile. "Don't even think about it." Maiev, who reacted the fastest, shouted angrily and hurled the moon wheel imbued with the power of moonlight at the swarm of bats in the air. The moon wheel traced a silver arc in the sky, heading straight for Tichondrius. However, Tichondrius anticipated the move and skillfully dodged the attack. At the same time, Maiev ordered the nearby priests, "Everyone, use the Moonlight Shield spell together." "Yes, yes!" Although their responses were mixed, the combat priests took the lead in casting the spell, and others quickly followed suit. They clasped their hands together and muttered incantations, as Maiev's second lunar attack was deflected by Tichondrius's massive flesh wings. A sharp whistling sound filled the air. At this critical moment, silver rays of light shot from the priest's palms, intertwining to form a solid shield. This shield exuded a soft moonlight, dispelling much of the darkness in the woods. The translucent shield enveloped all the priests like a timely rain, narrowly blocking Tichondrius's fatal attack. The fragile defensive barrier trembled under the relentless assault of countless ferocious insects from another world, as if it might collapse at any moment. However, as more priests poured their power into the barrier, it grew stronger. The moonlight shield gradually solidified, emitting a soft but firm light. The black bugs that tried to breach the shield were purified into harmless powder upon contact with the moonlight, falling to the ground one after another. Tichondrius seemed troubled by the strong shield. He hovered in the air, glaring at the group of priests below, searching for a weakness. Ethan's careful observation revealed that the moonlight shield was not a simple defense mechanism. It was a combination of two powerful divine spells, Shield of Order and Holy Aura. The former specialized in combating chaotic forces, while the latter purified and resisted evil forces. Given that the Burning Legion embodied chaos and evil, this combination was particularly effective against them. The chaotic and evil nature of their fell energy and shadow force seemed powerless against the Moonlight Shield, as if they were naturally restrained. However, pure defense alone couldn't completely turn the tide. Although Dijana's previous ranged attack inflicted significant damage on the enemy, the demon's vitality was astonishingly resilient. With just a brief rest, they could rejoin the fight. Even more troubling was the fact that the Hellfire bodies, constructed from evil energy, were as hard as iron and had successfully withstood the previous bombardment from the Luna railgun. Now, they were slowly but steadily advancing towards the grove. Seeing that the sneak attack had failed, Tichondrius remained unfazed and chose not to confront the Moon God realm directly. Instead, he cunningly roamed outside the barrier, looking for opportunities. Whenever Maiev and her companions attempted to evacuate, he could predict their moves and harass the battle priests in the direction they were heading. This cat-and-mouse game left Maiev and the others feeling stressed and helpless. After several failed attempts to break out, Maiev grew increasingly anxious and frustrated as she watched the Hellfire inch closer and the demon guards regroup. She gritted her teeth and angrily waved the moon wheel in her hand. "Damn it! This guy is obviously stalling for time on purpose." If they couldn't find a breakthrough soon, an even more brutal battle awaited them. Chapter 669, Instigating the Rebellion of the Moon Guards. As the crisis continued to approach, even Maiev began to look a little panicked. In this tense atmosphere, only Ethan and Tyrande still maintained a calm demeanor. Tyrande moved among the crowd, her soft voice and warm smile comforting everyone, soothing every panicked heart like a spring breeze. She encouraged the sisters, calmed their emotions, and made everyone feel the firmness and strength in her heart. Gradually, they calmed down and joined her in attacking the devil. This should have been the responsibility of the high priest. At this moment, Tyrande completely shed the shyness and reserve she had when facing high-level priests. She seemed to be a different person, showing her unique charm as a future leader of the clan. Ethan looked at Tyrande's figure in the crowd and couldn't help but feel filled with emotion. He finally understood why Tyrande had the last laugh in the competition for the position of high priest. Her leadership, calmness, and tenacity were all qualities necessary for a leader. Even without Elun's special favor, just because Tyrande could remain composed in this situation, she was already much better than Maiev. Ethan himself, with the guarantee of arcane magic, was naturally the calmest among everyone present. He had already prepared for the worst. If things went wrong, he would simply expose his identity as a mage and activate the group conveyor belt to escape with them. For the sake of Elun's oracle and life-saving grace, these priests would not discriminate against him. Of course, this was not his first choice. After all, exposing his identity would bring a series of risks and troubles. If the Demon Guard and Hellfire are allowed to complete the encirclement, and this big bat is hiding aside to make a fuss, the main force of gold, which is not Elun's sister gold, will be killed here, Ethan thought, assessing the situation. He looked around and saw that the demons were gradually narrowing the encirclement, while Tichondrius stood aside and watched coldly, as if he was a hunter waiting for his prey to fall into the trap. Ethan turned his attention to the moon guards hundreds of meters away. The elite of these mage troops had stopped moving at this time. Many of them had their hands folded, with gloating smiles on their faces, ready for a show. However, Ethan knew that not everyone in the Moon Guard was loyal to the Legion. As he had noticed before, many people did not have strong objections to the Burning Legion's attitude towards treating them like slaves and their increasingly outrageous evil deeds in recent years. In that case, let's give it a try. I hope these Moon Guards can understand what I mean, Ethan decided. He stopped merely observing and extended his hand towards Tichondrius. Immediately afterwards, Flamestrike fell from the sky, and the blazing fire descended on the head of the Dreadlord like an angry fire dragon. At the same time, several vines emerged from the ground and stretched out towards the big bat in the air. Tichondrius was teasing the battle priests with long-range combat capabilities in a playful manner. The arrows and offensive spells fired by Tyrande and others were either easily knocked away by his wide flesh wings or were blocked by the fell shield. Except for Maiev, it was difficult for anyone else to pose a sufficient threat to Tichondrius, which gave him the confidence to harass them outside the barrier. Until Ethan took action. Ethan's combat prowess was completely different from that of most priests, and his attacks forced Tichondrius to be distracted. The blazing flames and sharp vines made him feel a little threatened, and he had to temporarily give up harassing the priests and instead deal with this sudden attack. However, the flame strike performed by Ethan did not focus on a single landing point. Its attack range far exceeded his expectations, covering a vast area of several meters in radius. The flames surged out like a frenzy, carrying the power of destruction. At the same time, thorns and vines erupted from the ground. They seemed to have an instinctive perception, launching a fierce attack on the creature with the highest energy in the scene, Tisu Diarai. These dancing vines, like flexible snakes, wound and twisted to block Tichondrius's escape routes. Faced with this sudden dual assault, Tichondrius had to take it seriously. He resisted part of the flame strike attack with an evil energy shield and tried his best to avoid the entangling vines. Even a leader of the dread demon kings like him couldn't help but feel a bit surprised by this sudden attack. He turned to Ethan, who was concentrating on casting spells with a hint of surprise. His eyes showed a trace of amusement and admiration. Interesting. I didn't expect that among these priests who use the power of light, there is also an incompatible alien mixed in. The sneak attack failed, but Ethan was not discouraged. He ignored Tichondrius's provocation and maintained a calm demeanor, continuing to attack the Dreadlord in the sky, who was dodging flexibly. "Major, look here!" A young moon guard, his face full of resentment, suddenly called out to his captain, his voice tinged with indescribable surprise. He pointed to the bushes in front of him, his eyes fixed on the lush greenery. "What's wrong? Is it a firefly?" Major Madrak looked in the direction of his finger with confusion, but found nothing unusual at first. However, when he carefully observed the bushes, his eyes suddenly caught a strange scene. There were countless fireflies living in the nearby bushes, their lights flashing in the night, making the jungle look beautiful. But the shrub in front of him was different. The number of fireflies living on it far exceeded that of other shrubs, and these fireflies seemed to gather together consciously to form a strange pattern. No, it was not a simple pattern, but a line of text. The major and the young guard stared at the ever-changing pattern and whispered, "Please help us, compatriots." During his time in this world, Ethan had relied on his superior intelligence to become familiar with the commonly used Darnassian language, the language of the night elves. He no longer needed to rely on language proficiency, Kaimwo, and the magic of bloody words to communicate smoothly with the night elves. This message was conveyed by using animal control to drive nearby fireflies. It could only be said that Ethan's previous perception of the emotions of these moon guards was correct. A few characters made up of fireflies were like a stone thrown into a pond, breaking the inner peace of some of the moon guards. The guards, who had long been dissatisfied with the burning legion, looked at the flashing words and fell into deep thought. Compatriot? Major Madrak murmured to himself. He clasped his hands together, trying to suppress his inner struggle. At this moment, his heart was filled with complex emotions, simple yet profound and heavy. After a while, he loosened his fist and let out a long sigh. Darnell, what do you think? Major Madrak's eyes turned to the anxious young man beside him, scratching his head. There was a hint of exploration in his tone, as if he was looking for some kind of resonance. Major, I think. I want to help them. Darnell stood up straight and said hesitantly. Major, that's what I thought about it. Seeing that Madrak didn't interrupt him, he took a deep breath and continued. I know that I am not qualified to comment on whether the Queen's choice is right or wrong, but those so-called envoys of the gods, can you really fully accept their behavior? Do you think so too? Major Madrak was silent for a moment. The balance in his heart had already made a choice, and Darnell's approval became the last straw that broke the camel's back. Then, he slowly turned his head towards his colleagues behind him. The crowd stood together, cheering for the devil, their voices rising in unison. Major Madrak raised his voice to address them. Everyone, please listen to me. As most of the moon guards turned their attention to Hall, he continued, this should not be the first time you have witnessed the atrocities of demons. Do you truly believe their actions are justified? Do you really think they are safeguarding the interests of the upper elves and the order of society? Ha! A blue-haired man sneered, retorting provocatively. Major Madrak, are you questioning Her Majesty the Queen's decision? This is an act of treason. Major Madrak glanced at the man. Despite all the moon guards wearing standard light armor, he noticed the man's enchanted decorations were far more elaborate, clearly customized. This indicated that, although their military ranks were similar, the man's status was significantly higher. Such armor was not cheap. However, Madrak remained unperturbed by the man's words and responded calmly. Captain Feldland Donglu, I am not questioning Her Majesty the Queen's decision. I merely hope that we can discuss this issue openly and honestly. After all, we are all moon guards and have the responsibility to protect the peace of this land. The next moment, another voice raised an objection. It was Darnell, seemingly contradicting Feldland Winterdew. He raised his right hand and spoke firmly. Major, I believe Her Majesty has been misled by the devil's rhetoric. As Lord Ravencrest has advocated, there must be villains inside and outside the palace who are stirring up trouble and trying to destroy our home. Chapter 670, The Most Dangerous Moment. Darnell and Major Madrak had a tacit understanding, setting the rhythm as they sang and harmonized. Their words sparked many discussions among the moon guards. That's right, someone immediately echoed impatiently. Lord Ravencrest has always been a loyal minister and a noble model in our hearts. The fact that he took the lead in resisting the devil shows the seriousness of the problem. Lord Ravencrest? Another exclaimed. He's a real hero. Some expressed indignation. Those demons are so abominable, deceiving Her Majesty the Queen with sweet words. I am from Suramar, someone revealed in a low voice. I heard that Archmage Elisande of Suramar also opposed summoning demons and broke with the court after his dissuasion failed. Someone shouted loudly, Of course, that villain is Xavius. This two-faced guy. I've long thought he wasn't a good person. This statement immediately resonated with others. That's right. It's said he was the first nobleman to surrender to the devil. It's really shameful. During these discussions, Major Madrak silently observed everyone's expressions and reactions. As more and more people spoke, he gradually understood the Moon Guard's intentions. Many indeed shared his disdain for demons, strengthening his determination to help. Shut up! Suddenly, an angry shout rang out, exploding in the air like thunder and shocking everyone. It was Feldland. He stared angrily at the moon guards who were talking amongst themselves and said sternly, "Lord Xavius is dedicated to serving the country, and taking refuge with Lord God Envoy is an order personally issued by Her Majesty the Queen. You will not tolerate your slander." Seeing everyone looking at him unconvinced, he stepped forward and said, "Do you also want to commit treason? Don't blame me." As soon as he finished speaking, Denal retorted with a sneer, "Besides, you actually think that Xavius is dedicated to serving the country? Don't you think it's ridiculous to say this? Can you now point at Savit's beast-like body, goat-like horns, and hooves, and pat your chest and say he is really dedicated to serving the country? You, an illegitimate son of a baron with a poor family background, are not worthy of commenting on Lord Xavius." Feldlin could not refute and directly pointed at Danal's family background, cursing him. Little did he know that his behavior was noticed by the other moon guards, proving him wrong. Major Madrak was observing silently, judging everyone's general stance from their expressions. "Okay, stop talking." Seeing that the quarrel among his subordinates was about to turn into swearing, he finally stopped being silent and stood up, reaching out to stop their argument. Then, he concluded, "Everyone, please listen to me. I have no right to make a decision on behalf of any of you, but I cannot just watch the moon god priest who showed mercy to us die miserably at the hands of the devil. This is very important to Eluin." Having said this, he was silent for a moment, and his eyes became firmer. "If you are willing to set out with me to help them, please stand in front of me. This is a voluntary choice. I will never force anyone." As soon as he finished speaking, the place fell into silence. Everyone was thinking about their own choices, caught off guard by the sudden decision of their immediate boss. It was Danal again. This young moon guard stood up first. He walked to the right front of Major Madrak and said firmly, "Major, I am willing to go with you." Seemingly encouraged by his behavior, several more moon guards stepped forward one after another. Soon, more and more moon guards came forward, and most chose to support Major Madrak and prepare to resist the devil. As a senior officer of the Burning Legion, the Dreadlord Tichondrius' head-to-head confrontation, Ethan's abilities seemed slightly inferior when compared to monsters such as the Abyss Lords, but this was only in comparison to his equally terrifying colleagues of the Burning Legion. He had no problem dealing with these moon god priests who were not adept at fighting. This extremely cunning dreadlord did not choose to attack outside the barrier of the moon god realm, knowing it would be a thankless battle. Instead, he relied on his keen insight and accurate judgment of the enemy's psychology to sense the eager desire of this night elf team to escape. Therefore, he adopted annoying harassment tactics, constantly testing and attacking, trying to delay time so that the Burning Legion's reinforcements could arrive near the woods and form an encirclement against the enemy. Although Ethan had mastered druid spells and could use the wild natural power of Azeroth to enhance his strength, he had not yet reached the level of a true great druid like Malfurion, and Tichondrius was a completely legendary demon. Although Ethan's natural magic power was impressive, it still had obvious limitations. Unable to use higher-level and more powerful natural spells, Ethan found that he could not pose a real threat to this cunning dreadlord. Tichondrius quickly noticed the difference between Ethan and other night elves. He keenly sensed the strange power fluctuations emanating from Ethan, which made him more vigilant towards the young druid. The cunning dreadlord relied on his rich combat experience and extraordinary reaction speed to successfully defuse Ethan's many sneak attack attempts, making it impossible for Ethan to find a breakthrough without using arcane magic. However, a person's energy is limited after all. After Tichondrius focused part of his attention on Ethan, he naturally neglected to be vigilant in other aspects. This allowed Maiev, the leader of the battle priests, who now had the tendency of a female Tyrannosaurus, to become more and more courageous as she fought. She led a large number of combat troops to launch a fierce attack on Tichondrius. Facing so many enemies, Tichondrius gradually felt a little powerless. As he continued to resist the enemy's attacks, his shoulders became heavier, and each time he resisted the attack, he needed to put in more effort. However, he did not give up. because his goal was not to defeat this tough group of fighters head-on. As the remaining demon guards and Hellfire approached, Tichondrius's face showed a ferocious, proud smile. He seemed to have seen the dawn of victory. "Humph, mortals, I admit that your fighting will is strong enough, but that's it," he said with a sneer in a mocking tone. The next moment, he transformed into the form of a little bat again, skillfully dodging the energy moonwheel thrown by Maiev, and then quickly retreated a certain distance. This move temporarily removed him from the center of the battle and allowed him to take a breather. "Let my men come and fight the second round with you," he ordered loudly. "Crush them!" Roar! As his command sounded, the demon guards striding forward in rows raised their huge two-handed weapons, slashing hard and hitting the defensive barrier jointly arranged by the priestesses. These physical attacks were powerful and heavy, and they also carried the power of evil energy. Although they could not break through the solid moon god realm in a short time, they brought huge pressure to the barrier. Ethan and the others watched the situation on the battlefield nervously, knowing that once Hellfire entered the battlefield, they would face an even more desperate situation. With the full-scale attack of the demons, the situation of the Night Elves became worse and worse, and everyone had to devote themselves to the battle. Tyrande's fingers were constantly pulling the bowstring, and the leather sheath that originally protected her fingers was completely torn. Her slender fingers were ruthlessly cut by the bowstring, and the blood was like crystal rubies, slowly dripping on the ground, dyeing the originally clean land red. However, even in the face of such adversity, she did not falter. Despite the pain etched on her face, she showed no intention of halting her attack. The stubborn girl gritted her teeth and continued to draw the bowstring. Tyrande shifted her aim from Tichondrius to the approaching Demon King. Her firm and decisive eyes made it clear that as long as she had breath, she would never let the devil succeed. Ethan noticed the blood-stained bowstring in Tyrande's hand, and his heart tightened. He quickly reached out and held her hand, stopping her from continuing to attack. "Stop for now, and let the nearby priest help you heal," Ethan said with concern. Tyrande stubbornly tried to break free from Ethan's grip, her eyes flashing with unwillingness. "But the battle is not over yet. I can't leave like this." "No buts," Ethan scolded sternly, though his eyes revealed his concern and worry for Tyrande. "Calm down. Don't get carried away by the excitement of battle. Fighting with injuries will only reduce your efficiency. You should at least treat and bandage your fingers before rejoining the battle." Tyrande bit her lower lip reluctantly, a hint of hesitation and struggle flashing in her eyes. In the end, she gave in and nodded gently. "I understand." She silently put down the longbow, but deep helplessness and depression were still evident in her eyes. She murmured to herself, "Why, even though I have worked so hard, do I still feel so powerless on the battlefield?" Ethan looked at her and couldn't help but feel pity. "Do you have any misunderstandings about the battlefield?" He sighed, gently patting her shoulder. "In this kind of melee, which often involves hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of people, do you think you can turn the tide of the war on your own? This idea underestimates both your enemies and your comrades." Of course, this could only be said to Tyrande now. In the future, when she becomes a complete embodiment, she will almost be Elun's small incarnation in the main material plane, capable of turning the tide of war on her own. "That's not what I meant. It's just—" Tyrande, unaware of her future potential, opened her mouth to say something, but was gently embraced by Ethan. "I know," Ethan continued. "I know you work hard, and I know you want to share more of the burden with your comrades. But victory or defeat on the battlefield is not decided by one person. It requires the cooperation of everyone. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Don't put all the responsibility on your shoulders. It shouldn't be yours, at least not now." Ethan felt the tense body in his arms stiffen at first, then gradually soften. "You feel powerless now, not because you are not strong enough, but because you have not found your own position and role," he advised. Ethan's words made Tyrande pause. She raised her head and looked at him blankly. Ethan's hand holding her tightened, while the other hand stroked her long hair. "I know you are worried, but I promise everything will turn around soon. But for now, let's take a rest." Under Ethan's comfort, Tyrande closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then slowly exhaled, letting her emotions gradually calm down. Ethan was right. She needed time to adapt to this battlefield and find her position and role. But for now, what she needed most was rest and recovery, so she could better face the next challenge. Chapter 6671. Since ancient times, deep love cannot be retained. Only tricks can win people's hearts. When it comes to pursuing girls, Ethan's style is very different from that of the brothers Malfurion and Illidan. Compared to them, he is like the bright moon in the sky, while they are mere fireflies in the grass. Illidan is known as the most ardent admirer in Azeroth. Whenever Tyrande appears, he can't help but rush forward, doing everything he can to please the girl he likes. However, his overenthusiasm often backfires, making her feel suffocated. Malfurion, on the other hand, is at the opposite extreme. He is simply a block of wood who doesn't understand charm. He always seems clumsy and at a loss when facing girls. No matter how explicit or implicit the girl's hints are, he manages to avoid all the right options in the most unexpected ways. One brother is a straightforward man, while the other is overly eager, making them a pair of sleeping dragons and phoenixes. However, Ethan is completely different from them. As the king of the Hogwarts harem, he truly understands the opposite sex and knows the tricks of pursuing girls. He always takes action without hesitation at critical moments, making full use of his charm. Relying on his psychic powers, he is also very adept at capturing moments of emotional fluctuation in girls, providing warm companionship when they need it most. Ethan never deliberately avoids close contact with girls. On the contrary, he believes that he can gradually get closer to them by increasing contact step by step. Every move he makes is like a carefully planned chess game, testing the opponent's boundaries while maintaining an air of mystery. This gives him an irresistible charm in the eyes of the opposite sex, drawing them into his world. It is precisely because of Ethan's unique approach that his intimacy with Tyrande in just a few dozen days surpassed the progress achieved by the brothers Malfurion and Illidan in hundreds of years. However, he also knew clearly that this was only limited to the degree of intimacy. In terms of deep friendship, he still couldn't compare with the Stormrage brothers. The emotional bond between them is a solid bridge forged through countless ups and downs, while the relationship between him and Tyrande is more like a newly bloomed flower that needs more time and care to thrive. Ethan is in no rush, though. He understands that he needs to push the boundaries step by step to gradually widen his territory and shape Tyrande's feelings. He is willing to use time and patience to nurture this relationship. In short, Tyrande's mood finally calmed down under Ethan's gentle comfort. She obediently retreated to the group of priests at the rear, but she could never take her eyes away from Ethan's back. For Tyrande, Ethan is undoubtedly a unique existence. This was the first time she met someone of the opposite sex like Ethan, and his appearance was like a dazzling light, illuminating her previously ordinary life. His handsome appearance and witty conversation could always capture her heart easily. In his company, Tyrande felt unprecedented happiness and relaxation. The only problem was that she was overwhelmed by Ethan's enthusiasm. They had only known each other for a short time, but he could always say words that made her heart race and make moves that made her blush and feel flustered. It feels like Tyrande has blushed and laughed more times in the past 10 days than in the past 100 years combined. Whenever she thinks of Ethan's unexpected words and deeds, she always feels an inexplicable emotion in her heart. She tried to remind herself to stay calm and not be swayed by Ethan's enthusiasm, but every time she faced him, she could not control her heartbeat. Whenever Tyrande reminded Ethan afterwards, he always explained with an apologetic smile, making her heart flutter even more. "This is the custom of us country people. We country people are like this," Ethan said with an innocent look. As a priestess of Suramar, Tyrande often traveled between nearby forests and villages. She was well aware of the rural customs of the night elves. At least in the countryside of Suramar Forest that she was familiar with, people's behavior was definitely not what Ethan described. His remarks about the countryside seemed more like a cover-up and an excuse to her. However, despite her insight into Ethan's inner workings, Tyrande never thought of exposing his ploy. Deep down in her heart, she seemed to inexplicably enjoy this kind of game, although she herself couldn't explain why. She didn't hate Ethan's behavior. On the contrary, to a certain extent, she found him a little cute like this. Out of their childhood friendship, the Stormrage brothers had always occupied an important place in her heart. Before meeting Ethan, she believed that she would marry either Malfurion or Illidan in the future. Between the two, she preferred the stable and reliable Malfurion. However, now, Tyrande found that her heart seemed to be wavering. The feeling Ethan brought to her was so unique that neither Malfurion nor Illidan could give her. Ethan's appearance was like a clear spring pouring into her peaceful inner lake, causing ripples. It was a brand new experience that she had never felt from Malfurion and Illidan, a magic that made her heart beat faster and her cheeks turn red. Ethan's enthusiasm, fun, and mystery made her feel novel and excited. Of course, she did not deny the advantages of Malfurion and Illidan. Malfurion's reliability made her feel at ease, and Illidan's deep affection also moved her. These qualities were more important than temporary fun and excitement. But now, she was starting to see that same light in Ethan. His concern made her feel warm, and his presence made her feel at ease. Although Illidan's deep affection was touching, Ethan's careful care also made her heart beat. Malfurion's stability was a guarantee, but Ethan just now also made her feel very at ease. Unknowingly, Tyrande's inner balance was constantly tipping. Ethan was concentrating on fighting demons at this moment. His tentacles were flexible and powerful, subduing those evil creatures. At this time, he knew nothing about Tyrande's inner thoughts. The emotional skills and strategies used by Ethan all originated from his highly developed information society. His exquisite control and endless methods were undoubtedly a brand new impact for a country girl like Tyrande. Perhaps this is in response to the old saying, since ancient times, deep love cannot be retained, only tricks can win people's hearts. At this moment, Ethan was multitasking. While fighting demons with his tentacles, he secretly communicated with the Moon Guard. His movements were swift and concealed, not affected by the chaos around him at all. Those demon guards, ensnared by thorns and vines, struggled helplessly in the air, as if swept by a ruthless storm. However, Ethan also discovered a problem. Although these thorn vines had a significant effect on the Moon Guard, they seemed somewhat powerless when dealing with demons. A simple vine attack could not cause much damage to the Demon Guard, which made him frown. However, he soon found a solution to the problem. He noticed that although physical attacks had little effect, he also had magic attacks, and the poisonous stings on the vines had a special effect on the Demon Guards. The toxins contained in these stings could interfere with the movement of evil energy in the demon's body. Under the influence of the toxin, the originally violent demon guards became increasingly unstable. Compared with arcane energy, evil energy had a very powerful destructive power, but its characteristics were also very distinctive. It was extremely difficult to control. Therefore, Ethan flexibly controlled the thorn vines, using their toxic stings to destabilize the demons. Ethan captured the demon guards who were corroded by the poison one by one. These demon guards struggled in the air, the evil energy in their bodies burning like out-of-control flames. Ethan knew that they had become bombs that could explode at any time. So, at the last moment before the bomb exploded, he accurately threw these demon guards into the ranks of his enemies. With deafening loud noises, the demon's team was blown to pieces. Distracted but determined, Ethan used his tentacles to severely punish the roaring demon guards while paying close attention to the movements of the moon guards in the distance. His psychic powers were like an invisible net, capturing every subtle change on the battlefield. Within the moon guard, there was quite a commotion because of Madrak's statement. Although Ethan could not judge the outcome of this commotion for the time being, he knew that he must be prepared to deal with all possibilities. Smashing Flame Strike against an unlucky demon guard again, Ethan's psychic powers suddenly sensed a strong crisis. He instinctively dodged to the side, narrowly escaping. Bah! A sharp sound broke through the air, and an extremely condensed beam of evil energy directly penetrated the protection of the moon god realm and landed at the location where Ethan had just been. If Ethan's reaction had been a little slower, the various arcane protective magics on his body would have been triggered automatically. Good luck to you. Seeing this, Tichondrius retracted his right index finger calmly. However, Ethan was keenly aware that Tichondrius's entire finger had turned black and was trembling. Obviously, this attack on Tichondrius also caused a lot of burden. Is it Archimonde's special skill, Finger of Death? Ethan frowned and stared at the big bat in the sky warily. He secretly guessed in his mind, but quickly rejected his idea. No, this power and momentum should be a weakened version of Finger of Pain. Moreover, this bat's spirit must have great limitations in using this move. It is absolutely impossible to cast it continuously. Despite this, Ethan also knew that he had become Tichondrius's main target. He no longer dared to cast spells as recklessly as before. Every time he took action, he became cautious, leaving no opportunity for Tichondrius to take advantage of. 3 updates have resumed in the past few days. Please give me monthly tickets, flowers, evaluation votes, and custom orders. Chapter 672, Summoning the Tree Man. However, there was still good news on the battlefield. Ethan glanced at the Moon Guards, who had finally started to take action, and an imperceptible glint flashed in his eyes. Very good. The opportunity to counterattack is finally here, he thought. The Moon Guards moved with extreme stealth, fully utilizing their talents as night elves. They silently traversed the battlefield like ghosts under the night sky. Major Madrak led a team of elite members, cleverly using Hellfire's massive size as cover, and moved closer to the battlefield step by step. Meanwhile, another group of Moon Guards, led by Felderin Mooncrown, chose to stay put. Although they found it difficult to understand and accept Madrak's actions, their years of working together made them choose to remain silent and observe, without reporting this internal dispute to the Burning Legion. The situation on the battlefield was changing rapidly, and Ethan knew he had to make decisions quickly. To buy time and opportunity for the Moon Guards, he resolutely shifted the focus of his attack, concentrating all his firepower on Tichondrius. "Priestess Maiev, please come and help me," he called out. Maiev moved like a bolt of lightning across the battlefield, her formidable skills leaving 2 demon guards unable to fight back. They were instantly felled by the moon wheel in her hand. At this moment, she stood right in front of the Moon Guards, scanning the surrounding battle with sharp eyes. Suddenly, Ethan's voice sounded in her ears, reminding her to pay attention to the movement in the distance. Maiev immediately turned her gaze in that direction, and her keen perception allowed her to instantly detect the faint movement there. She understood Ethan's intention without any unnecessary words and swiftly moved to his side. The two stood side by side, targeting Tichondrius with a shared understanding. Maiev once again gripped the moonwheel tightly, pointing its sharp edge at the demon lord, a cold light flashing. "Ah, a useless struggle," Tichondrius sneered, seemingly unconcerned about the attacks of these 2 mortals. Although his right hand was temporarily incapacitated, he remained calm in the face of Ethan and Maiev's combined assault. With a light wave of his left hand, 10 pale green energy shields instantly enveloped his body. Maiev's moon disk struck the shield hard, but was unable to penetrate the solid defense, leaving only a shallow mark on the surface. Ethan's flame strike followed closely behind, hitting Tichondrius's shield like a high explosive bomb. The 2 different forms of energy clashed with a deafening noise, making the entire battlefield tremble. It seemed they still had no way to deal with Tichondrius, but in reality, the Fear Demon King was temporarily restrained by their attacks and could not focus on other matters. The situation on the battlefield remained thorny. While Ethan and Maiev concentrated on dealing with the Dreadlord, the ferocious demon guards were left unattended, and it was clearly difficult for the moon god priests to handle them alone. Ethan's eyes wandered among the surrounding trees, and soon a new plan formed in his mind. While Maiev continued to suppress Tichondrius with the moon wheel, Ethan quietly injected his natural power into the nearby god of the forest. In this originally peaceful grove, many trees had been overturned by the aftermath of the battle and lay on the ground in disarray. The relatively narrow fighting space of the woods was undoubtedly a limitation for the demon guards, who were large and armed with heavy weapons. Their massive weapons were quite inconvenient to wield in this confined space. The dense forest echoed with the dull thuds of demon guards colliding with tree trunks. Some of the enraged guards abandoned their attacks altogether, opting instead to chop down nearby trees in an attempt to clear an open battlefield. Under their relentless destruction, the once lush woods quickly turned into a chaotic mess. However, the demon guards failed to realize that their actions had provoked the wrath of nature itself. Wisps of green light rose from the ground, wrapping around Ethan's fingertips before slowly spreading outward. These lights seemed imbued with life, weaving through the trees and gently touching every leaf and branch. As the druid chanted, the lights grew more intense, as if an invisible force was awakening the slumbering earth. "Forest guard," Ethan intoned. Suddenly, the trees on the battlefield began to tremble. Complex lines appeared on their bark, resembling ancient runes that glowed with a faint green light. Moments later, holes opened at the roots of the trees, forming thick, trunk-like legs. Figures composed of intertwined trees and vines slowly rose from the ground. The tree people were tall and imposing, standing together as if the ancient forest had come to life. Their bodies were skillfully woven from the branches and leaves of various trees, appearing as hard as iron. As they marched through the forest, each step was accompanied by the trembling of the ground and the rustling of leaves, declaring their dominance on the battlefield. Roar! One of the tallest tree men let out a thunderous scream and thrust a sharp branch from the root of his left hand. The branch, like a sword, instantly skewered a demon guard who couldn't evade in time. The guard's scream ceased abruptly, its life proving fragile against the tree man's power. The sudden appearance of the tree men caught the demon guards off guard. Even the formidable Protagonist had to shift his focus to these new adversaries. He flapped his massive wings, hovering in the air, and watched the mysterious creatures warily. Two. At that moment, a smaller tree man spat out a stream of unidentified spherical objects towards the airborne Protagonist. These objects traced strange arcs in the air, heading straight for him. Although uncertain of their power, Protagonist chose to evade them out of caution. He performed a series of agile maneuvers, successfully dodging the attack. Upon closer inspection, Protagonist realized that the objects were acorns shot by the tree man, who had transformed from an oak tree. Is this a branch thrust? And a seed machine gun? Ethan couldn't help but feel amused at the sight of the tree man using familiar moves. Druid spells could summon trents, but each druid's creations were unique. This uniqueness stemmed not only from the differences in their strength, but also from the imagination and creativity within their hearts. As a creator, each druid could use their will and power to craft tree warriors with distinct shapes and unique skills. As a time traveler, Ethan had subconsciously integrated grass-type skills from Pokemon into the consciousness of the tree people he summoned. Consequently, his tree people not only had varied forms, but also possessed skills and methods beyond those of ordinary tree people, enhancing their combat effectiveness. However, Ethan's tactical success wasn't solely due to his unique summoning method. There was an indescribable bond between the druid profession and nature. Druids could keenly perceive the abstract and subtle emotional changes of nature, a perception that served as their most powerful martial asset. This was why a druid's main attribute was perception. In the midst of battling the demons, Ethan deeply felt the anger and sorrow of the forest. The trees, corroded by evil energy, and the fallen creatures from the battle all spoke of the forest's suffering. Therefore, Ethan made the decision to harness the anger of nature, transforming this rage and sorrow into the power of tree warriors, allowing them to become guardians of the forest. His decision proved to be the right one. The corrosive, evil energies had indeed caused severe damage to the forest. Out of reverence and care for nature, the night elves always tried to avoid harming the animals and plants in the woods. However, the demons showed no such restraint, trampling on the land without any regard. When the transformed tree warriors saw their homes destroyed, their anger surged like a volcanic eruption. They channeled this fury into immense power and launched a desperate struggle against the demons on the battlefield. Ethan's choice to cast the spell to summon the tree warriors was doubly effective because of this anger. His tree warriors were not only numerous, but also incredibly brave, putting the demons in a tough fight. Although there were only a little over 20 tree warriors, they couldn't decisively change the entire battle's outcome. Once the demons reorganized, they would soon eliminate the tree warriors. However, their appearance was like dropping a stone into a calm lake, causing ripples. Their presence quietly altered the previously one-sided battle. At the very least, the members of the Sisterhood of Elune saw hope in the powerful tree warriors. They glimpsed the dawn of victory, and their morale soared. Chapter 673, How Dare You Chat Here? After the tree men appeared, the battle situation slightly reversed, and Tichondrius noticed something was wrong. As he angrily dodged the flying leaf knife, seed machine gun, and other long-range attacks coming from the sky, he suddenly felt a chill behind him. Arcane missile, launch! Major Madrak's voice suddenly sounded behind him. Tichondrius turned around abruptly and saw a bright arcane barrage piercing the sky, heading straight for him. Boom! The arcane barrage, representing the power of order, collided fiercely with the evil energy shield of chaos in the air, bursting out with dazzling light. The two mutually repelling energies caused a large explosion, with air waves churning and smoke filling the air. Tichondrius was hit by the sudden explosion shockwave, and his whole body was thrown away like a kite with a broken string. He struggled in the air and finally flapped his wings again, barely maintaining his balance. Tichondrius fell to the ground in embarrassment, glaring at the moon guard who attacked him. "Are you crazy?" His voice rolled in like thunder, echoing in everyone's ears. His eyes burned with anger, as if he wanted to swallow up all the betrayers. "I, Tichondrius, represent the will of Ashara. How dare you, puny upper elves, betray your own queen?" Hearing him mention Queen Ashara, the moon guards who had originally attacked suddenly paused in their spellcasting movements. A trace of hesitation and fear flashed in their eyes. They began to feel overwhelmed, as if they had been stabbed in the softest place in their hearts. Yes, they had all once sworn allegiance to Queen Ashara. Were their current actions truly not a betrayal of the light? At this moment, Ethan suddenly laughed loudly and powerfully, instantly attracting everyone's attention. He glanced at everyone present with piercing eyes and then said loudly, "I thought that as a demon leader, you would have something meaningful to say when you came to the front of the battle and faced the soldiers of the two armies. I didn't expect you to spout such vulgar words. I have something to say. Please listen carefully." Ethan's voice was sonorous, powerful, and well-founded, resonating with the moon guards. Before you arrived, the empire was in decline, and treacherous ministers caused trouble. The country was in chaos, but it could still be maintained. After you arrived, disasters happened one after another. You kidnapped the queen and brutalized the living beings. In the temples, traitors became officials. Everywhere in the land, demons caused trouble. You caused those wolf-hearted people to run rampant in the court, killing and brutalizing. The gangsters wreaked havoc one after another. The country has been turned into ruins, and the people are suffering. At this point, Ethan's voice suddenly became high-pitched. He pointed at Tichondrius and shouted loudly, "Devil, what qualifications do you have to represent the Queen's will? You keep saying that it is for the benefit of the Queen and the upper elves, but everything you did has put them in dire straits. Everyone in the world is willing to eat your flesh alive. How dare you talk here?" As soon as Ethan finished speaking, there was a sound of agreement all around. You dare!" Tichondrius was speechless, helpless, and furious. "I have never seen such a shameless person," Ethan finally shouted, as if to deliver a final blow. The shameless Tichondrius would naturally not be the one who wanted to show off to Wang Lang and be scolded to death on the spot by the words spoken in front of the two armies. But the goal of Ethan's speech was not to curse him to death, but to convince the moon guards. The upper elves who were stumped by Tichondrius's words also regained their direction. In Ethan's impassioned speech, the soldiers straightened their backs, and the confusion and fear in their eyes were instantly replaced by determination and courage. They had found their backbone, their own faith and resolve. They realized that it didn't matter whether they were queens or not. Although their starting points were different from those of the Night Elf commoners, at this moment their goal was the same: to stop the devil from becoming more and more unscrupulous. As Ethan said, with the arrival of demons who call themselves angels, the situation of the Dark Knight Empire was deteriorating. Didn't this prove the evil nature of these god messengers, and that what they brought was not salvation and hope, but destruction and disaster? Major Madrak held the staff in his hand tightly, and his eyes became firm. "Moon guards," he ordered loudly, "let us take back the glory and dignity that should belong to us from these lying demons. Charge for the sake of the Dark Knight Empire and our compatriots." The Burning Legion's military discipline had always been loose. Their ability to maintain strong combat effectiveness mainly relied on the demons' lack of fear of death. Anyway, they could return to the twisting nether if they died, and they could be resurrected sooner or later, which made them fearless on the battlefield. However, not being afraid of death did not mean that they would actively seek it. It was not easy for demons to be resurrected after death. Their souls needed to wait a long time to condense and take shape again, and in the process, they might even be devoured by their peers. That kind of endless darkness and loneliness was not a wonderful experience. Therefore, they were not without fear when facing the attacks of the Moon Guards. The demon army, which was attacked from both sides, finally showed signs of defeat in increasingly bad battles. Those demons, who were once arrogant and domineering, were now scattered like sand and gravel blown away by a strong wind under the joint attack of the Moon Guard and the Night Elves. And those slow-moving and cumbersome hellfires were completely wiped out by the large-scale spells carefully arranged by the Moon Guards on the way forward, leaving no room for struggle. Tichondrius was suspended in midair, staring at the battlefield below with a gloomy expression. He once again escaped the joint attack of the two armies in embarrassment, and the wounds on his body were still aching. However, what made him even more resentful was that the end of this battle had come early, and he was the loser. As the Deceiver's lieutenant, his status in the Burning Legion was not low. That he would be sent to carry out this task in person was enough to show that Lord Archimonde attached great importance to this matter. Archimonde and Kil'jaeden, as the two giants under Sargeras, had always been in conflict, and now he had been defeated. When he returned, he couldn't even imagine how Lord Archimonde would punish him. "Very good," Tichondrius gritted his teeth and said, his voice full of anger and unwillingness. "I will remember your rebellious behavior and pray that I have no relatives in Zin Ashari. Sooner or later, you will be responsible for your impulse. Pay the price." As the lingering sound of Tichondrius' harsh words echoed in the air, his figure flashed, and he accelerated towards the sky. The black wings spread out like night, covering his figure, and he disappeared from everyone's sight in an instant. The battle priests looked in the direction in which the demon was escaping, and their tense nerves finally relaxed. They had gone through two fierce battles one after another, and now it seemed as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. A rare relief showed on their tired faces. Maiev waved her hand to stop her subordinates from chasing the fleeing demon. Her sharp eyes glanced around the field and finally rested on the Moon Guard on the opposite side, who was dozens of meters away. Those compatriots who were supposed to fight with them had previously sided with the devil. The experience of fighting Madrak was still vivid in Maiev's mind. However, now, at this critical moment, they were on their side. This kind of repetition puzzled Maiev. Her thoughts drifted to the source of all this, and her eyes naturally fell on Ethan. The battle priest captain scrutinized Ethan, trying to read some clues from his expression. "Is this the reinforcements you mentioned before?" Maiev asked, her tone filled with confusion. "When did you convince them to rebel?" Faced with Maiev's question, Ethan merely smiled slightly and did not answer directly. This showy attitude made Maiev angry again. At this moment, Major Madrak stepped forward to clear up Maiev's doubts. He recounted in detail how Ethan had contacted them and how he had convinced them on his own. After listening to Madrak's explanation, Maiev looked at Ethan with a newfound brightness in her eyes. The admiration in her heart was beyond words, and Tyrande also cast an approving look at Ethan. Sure enough, Ethan wasn't bragging before, Tumezi sighed. He does have a solution. At this moment, Tyrande began to realize that her new friend was more than just a fun playmate. In critical moments, he could also show outstanding leadership and persuasion, and he could completely become the person she relied on. Chapter 674, Internal Strife. Once the threat of external enemies disappears, internal conflicts often emerge like a tide and can no longer be ignored. This is especially true between the Sisters of Elune and the Moon Guard. They had fought side by side to resist foreign enemies, but after the demons left, the issues that had been temporarily shelved due to the battle resurfaced in everyone's minds. After a short rest, Maiev stood up and took the lead. First of all, I would like to thank the Moon Guards for their help at the critical moment. Her eyes were as sharp as a hawk, staring closely at Major Madrak. But one thing is another. I want to clarify your position now. High Priestess Dejana had not yet awakened, and Maiev, as the leader of the battle priests of the Sisters of Elune, had naturally become the representative of everyone. The priests present had no objection to her standing up to question. They stood behind her silently, giving her their support. However, Maiev's style was completely different from that of the gentle High Priestess Dejana. She was more forceful and direct, an attitude that dissatisfied some of the Moon Guards. They already had grudges due to previous conflicts, and now they felt that Maiev was deliberately provoking them. "What's your attitude?" A Moon Guard couldn't help but step forward, his voice filled with anger. "That's right. We obviously saved you, but now you are questioning us?" Another echoed. Not to be outdone, the battle priests on Maiev's side stepped forward one after another to confront the Moon Guards. The atmosphere at the scene became tense instantly, and the eyes of both parties collided fiercely in the air, as if sparks were about to fly. Just when this group of night elves was almost at war with each other, things were still peaceful where Ethan stood. Despite the tense atmosphere, Ethan did not comment on the conflict. He just silently watched the tense confrontation not far away, like a calm bystander. Although he had successfully rebelled against the Moon Guard, he was fully aware of his role in the conflict. Sure enough, even if they have just experienced cooperation, the conflicts between the two parties cannot be eliminated so easily, Ethan thought to himself. He understood that whether it was the Sisters of Elune or the Moon Guard, they all had their own profound beliefs and positions. The reason why he was able to successfully instigate rebellion against the Moon Guard was simply the result of taking advantage of the situation and going with the flow. This did not mean that he was qualified to intervene in their conflicts. At the edge of the battlefield, he was sitting quietly on a huge tree stump, and Tyrande was sitting in front of him. The fingers of her right hand were wrapped with blood-soaked bandages from her previous battle wounds. Although the priestesses had given her preliminary treatment and bandaging, blood was still oozing from the wound. Ethan gently and carefully removed the bandage on Tyrande's finger, his movements very careful for fear of causing her additional pain. Then, using rejuvenation on Tyrande, Ethan waved his hands gently, releasing warm healing energy that surrounded Tyrande's fingers. This warm healing energy was like the spring sunshine, gently falling on Tyrande's wounds. It penetrated quietly, and wherever it passed, the pain gradually melted away like ice and snow, replaced by a numbing comfort. This was not just a simple wound healing, but also a kind of nourishment and renewal of vitality. Different from the game, in this real world of Azeroth, even the most powerful healing technique had its unavoidable price. Just like those emergency treatment methods in wartime, although they could bring amazing results in a short period of time, they were essentially overdrawing the life of the recipient. This was like a modern doctor injecting epinephrine into seriously injured and dying patients. Although it could temporarily stimulate their vitality and help them survive the most dangerous moments, once the excitement, when the period promoted by this spell passes, the overdrawn vitality will surge out like a tidal wave, bringing an unbearable burden to the injured. In the worst case, this overdraft may even directly endanger the life of the injured person. Therefore, whether it is the divine spells performed by the priests of Elune or the natural spells used by the druids, they must be particularly careful when treating wounds. They know very well that most treatments speed up wound healing by stimulating the physical functions and potential of the recipient. Although this kind of stimulation can bring significant results in a short period of time, it cannot avoid the impact on the recipient, placing an additional burden on the body. Unless the situation is extremely urgent, healers usually choose milder and longer-lasting healing spells to treat the injured. Although this cannot bring about amazing results in a short period of time, it can minimize the burden on the injured person's body while ensuring the therapeutic effect. After carefully treating Tyrande, Ethan gently took out a brand new bandage and carefully bandaged her wound. His movements were gentle and skillful, like those of an experienced doctor. The bandage was slowly wrapped around his hand, tightly securing Tyrande's wound, bringing her peace of mind and warmth. Ethan knew that this country girl had tried her best in the previous battle. Although the injury was not serious, the exhaustion of her physical strength had left her in a state of fatigue. He sighed softly, feeling a pang of pity for this tough girl. "You are too reckless. No one asked you to do this," Ethan said reproachfully while tying 10 cute bows at the end of the bandage like a prank. This small gesture made Tyrande feel a little helpless. She glared at Ethan, but a smile appeared on her lips. "It's true that no one asked for it. I just wanted to do it myself. Don't you think this is a bit too cute?" Tyrande said awkwardly, her voice getting lower and lower until it almost turned into a murmur. Ethan shrugged and said with a mischievous smile, "Being tied up nicely will help you regain your mood. How about it? Have you calmed down?" Tyrande was stunned, as if she didn't expect Ethan to say this. She subconsciously wanted to deny it, but her words turned into, "Why calm down? I haven't lost my mind." Hearing that she was still trying to defend herself, Ethan stepped forward and flicked her forehead. "Ah!" Tyrande let out an aggrieved cry and touched her forehead. However, Ethan's somewhat intimate gesture did not make her show any disgust. Instead, the local girl lowered her head shyly. This was the result of Ethan's strategy of sun arching and one pawn. During this battle, the interaction between him and Tyrande gradually increased, and the trust and tacit understanding between them also quietly grew. At this moment had unknowingly become accustomed to Ethan's level of intimacy, and Ethan gradually won her trust and dependence in the process. "Do you think I can't tell?" Ethan's voice suddenly became solemn. He stared into Tyrande's eyes. Tyrande suddenly felt that her heart had been seen through. "Although your fighting style looks extremely brave and even inspired the priests around you who are not good at fighting to some extent, in this battle, your performance can only be described as out of control." Tyrande's eyes flickered for a moment, as if she wanted to avoid Ethan's gaze. This time, she was hit hard by Ethan's words, and her expression became slightly depressed. "I know that you have a deep hatred for the burning legion in your heart," Ethan sighed softly and continued. "Although this hatred makes you brave in battle, excessive hatred can also make you reckless and even irrational. I do not advocate this hysterical way of venting. Using hatred as motivation will drive you to destruction. You need to calm down, think everything through, and use your reason and calmness to control the flames of revenge." He paused, his voice softening. Ethan's voice became softer. "This is the mentality of an avenger that I think is reasonable. Keep going like this, and sooner or later you will burn yourself out with uncontrolled rage." Ethan recalled Tyrande from the original book. As the leader of the Night Elves, she was indeed very qualified, but once she fell into a state of fighting fever, she was no different from Maiev. That kind of character must have developed during the ancient war. After saying that, Ethan patted Tyrande's shoulder and comforted her softly. "You should think about it for yourself. I will go to the front to check the situation. During this time, please don't show off and take a good rest. Remember, only by staying calm and rational can we better face future challenges." Well, even though she had 1,000 thoughts in her heart, Tyrande nodded obediently like a little girlfriend at this time, and then watched Ethan leave. She turned to face the Moon Guard and the Battle Priest, who were still arguing, and walked towards the confrontation point. "Priest Maiev, warriors of the Moon Guard," Ethan's voice was clear and powerful, instantly cutting through the chaotic dispute. He smiled as he spoke, waving his hands to both parties, trying to calm down this meaningless argument. After all, we are comrades working together to defeat the devil. At this moment, we should unite as one instead of fighting among ourselves. Humph. Upon hearing this, young Daniel curled his lips slightly, showing a trace of disdain. He whispered in a low voice, "Who is fighting with you? We Moon Guards have always acted independently. We just couldn't stand the evil deeds of the Burning Legion, so we came to help. Don't be sentimental." "Daniel, that's enough." Madrak frowned slightly and spoke out to stop his subordinate's dissatisfaction. He turned to face Ethan. The scar on his left eye stood out in the sunlight, adding a bit of majesty to him. "We belonged to different camps before, so we didn't have the opportunity to communicate well. I am Madrak from the Star Eye family, the Major of the Moon Guard. Are you the one who just sent us a distress signal? Among so many Moon God priests, only you, the Druid, can do this." "Exactly," Ethan smiled and nodded, extending his hand to shake Madrak's. "I am Ethan Koya, a Druid. I am currently working with the Tyran priests to execute Lord Ravencrest's orders and convey his strategic intentions." Chapters 66 and 75, Reaching Consensus. The expressions of the Moon Guards darkened instantly when Ethan introduced himself. It was as if a cold wind had blown across the surface of a lake. Their eyes revealed a deep fear and distrust of the Druid profession. To these Moon Guards, who revered arcane and magical power, Druids were powerful yet controversial due to their close connection with the lower elves. Just as the atmosphere was about to reach a deadlock, Maiev snorted and stood up to explain. "Ethan is a dependent of the moon god Elune. He accepted Elune's oracle not long ago, so he's more than just a druid." "Oracle of Elune?" Madrak and the other Moon Guards looked at Ethan with renewed interest. Despite their primary role in safeguarding the interests of the Highborn, they maintained a devout faith in Elune. The Moon Guards exchanged doubtful and probing looks. They had besieged La Salaza for many days and had come into contact with Mavido, the leader of the battle priests, already knowing her character. Although this priestess had a tough style, her words were never false. Moreover, this involved the moon god Elune, making it impossible for Maiev to lie. Thinking of the visions of heaven and earth a few days ago, they seemed to understand something. Under Madrak's guidance, the Moon Guards came to their senses. They respectfully held their chests and saluted Ethan, saying piously, "Dear Moon God family, please forgive us for our previous offense." "It doesn't matter." Ethan waved his hand gently, indicating that they need not worry. "I was entrusted by Elune. You all also want to protect your beliefs and homes. I understand your feelings." By the way, Ethan suddenly remembered something and clapped his hands. "Since we are now on the same front, why not exchange information? I would like to know how the battle is going on the front line now." "Intelligence from the front line?" Madrak frowned upon hearing this. He tried hard to recall the news he had received recently, but eventually shook his head helplessly. "I'm sorry, Master Ethan. We don't know much about the latest situation on the Zin al-Shari front either." He smiled bitterly and continued, "The person most qualified to answer this question is Captain Feldlin Mooncrown. He is the second son of the Mooncrown family. His father is a high-ranking official in Zin al-Shari, and his mother is also a noble. He has a distinguished family, so he has always been responsible for contacting the capital. Unfortunately, he did not follow us because he had disagreements with us, so now we know very little about the specific battle situation on the front line." Ethan and Maiev exchanged glances, each seeing a hint of helplessness in the other's eyes. They also noticed that the number of Moon Guards in front of them was less than half compared to the previous battle. Those Moon Guards who still chose to believe in the Burning Legion had parted ways with Madrak and others after the battle and returned to Zin al-Shari to resume their lives. The person who had the information left early, leaving Madrak ignorant of the latest situation of Zin al-Shari. Prior to this, all of Ethan's information about the Resistance came from Tyrande, but Tyrande had not left the Resistance for a short time, so her information was not very timely. They only knew that before she left, the Coalition Force's advisor Crassus had once proposed to the Black Crow Lord to seek assistance from the Dragon Clan, and this proposal received the firm support of Malfurion. However, had the dragons responded to the call? When would the demigods be able to fully commit to the battle? They had no idea. Ethan had originally hoped that the Moon Guards could provide more detailed information to help, cleared up the fog. Unfortunately, Madrak and his men were also stuck in a desert of intelligence and were unable to provide him with more clues. Despite this, the information collected by the guards in the past still provided certain enlightenment for Ethan and Maiev. Just as Ethan had said before when he urged Maiev to act faster, her biological brother, Gerard Shadowsong, was indeed highly valued by the leader of the resistance, Lord Ravencrest. The rebels used Black Crow Castle as their base and launched a steady stream of fierce attacks on Zin Ashari. Thinking of her youngest brother playing an important role in this huge battle, Maiev felt a surge of complicated emotions in her heart. She caressed her chest gently and exhaled a long breath, trying to calm her restless heart. At least, she knew that her brother was still alive and still fighting for their common goal. Ethan touched his chin gently, frowned slightly, and continued to ask, "So what about the dragon army? Didn't they join the battle? Their strength should be indispensable for the current war situation, right?" "Dragon Legion?" Madrak was stunned for a moment after hearing this, a look of surprise on his face. He turned to look at Ethan, curiosity lighting up his eyes. "I thought this was just a legend spread among mages. Does the dragon army really exist?" Ethan nodded slightly and said affirmatively, "Yes, the dragon army does exist. They are one of the oldest and most powerful creatures on the continent of Azeroth, possessing unparalleled strength and wisdom. If they can be persuaded to join the fight, our chances of winning against the devil will be greatly increased." Madrak was dumbfounded when he heard this. He imagined the scene of thousands of giant dragons soaring on the battlefield and spitting fire, and he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride and ambition in his heart. However, he soon shook his head with a wry smile and said, "To be honest, I don't know the situation of the Dragon Legion. I only heard that the Red Dragon appeared on the battlefield, but I never heard of the Dragon Legion joining the fight." "So the Dragon Soul hasn't been created yet?" Ethan nodded thoughtfully, integrating the information provided by Tyrande and Madrak. He had a general understanding of the development of the situation. "Major Madrak, thank you very much for the valuable information you provided." Ethan raised his head and looked through the dancing firelight, focusing on the Moon Guards sitting on the other side of the fire with the priestesses. Their figures were looming in the firelight. Ethan frowned slightly and continued to ask, "So, what are your plans next?" "As far as I know, Queen Ashara is a person who can't tolerate disobedience once she learns that you have violated her will." He did not continue speaking, but the worry and concern in his words were clearly conveyed to Madrak and the others. Hearing this question, Madrak and the others couldn't help but exchange glances, and all the Moon Guards showed confusion in their eyes. "To tell you the truth, we don't know what to do next." Madrak smiled bitterly and said helplessly, "Although we were mentally prepared, when we actually faced the choice, we found that our minds were completely blank." Ethan could hear his helplessness and confusion. The upper elves worshipped Queen Ashara almost blindly, which could be seen from the attitude of Lord Ravencrest. As the commander-in-chief of the resistance army, the reason why he raised the flag of rebellion was just to eliminate the evil people around the queen, but he did not really want to betray her. However, the power-hungry Ashara has always had zero tolerance for those who betray her. The tragic experiences of Lord Ravencrest and Master Ferodis, who managed Asuna in the original work, are living examples. "I have a question." Ethan's voice broke the silence, his eyes as sharp as knives, staring closely into Madrak's eyes. Madrak felt a shiver in his heart, knowing that Ethan's question, the task would not be simple. He nodded and motioned for Ethan to continue. "Even now, do you still believe that someone deceived the queen and that it was not her original intention to attract the devil?" "Certainly." Before Madrak could speak, Danal stood up excitedly. "It must be the chief advisor Xavius who is doing something secretly. That guy, colluding with the devil, deceived others, and Her Majesty the Queen must have been blinded by him." "Unfortunately, Danal, that's not the case." Ethan shook his head slightly and interrupted Danal decisively. "According to the information we have gathered, It was Our Majesty the Queen who took the initiative to open the portal. She even considered becoming the leader of the demons, the Queen of Sargeras. No, it can't be right. Ethan's words were like a bolt from the blue, instantly shattering Danel's belief. He stood there dumbfounded, as if he had lost all his strength, and could only mutter to himself, "You are lying to me. You are lying to me, right?" Maev glanced at Danel coldly and saluted him with a knife. "He didn't lie to you." There was no emotion in her voice. She is the only one among the Highborn who has the authority to open them the Well of Eternity for the Burning Legion. As for Xavius, does he have that qualification? Does he have that ability? In the final analysis, Xavius is just a pawn in the hands of Queen Ashara, and all his actions and decisions are controlled by the Queen. It is true that he has selfish motives, but this is all because he has deep love and admiration for Ashara in his heart. He longs to do great things and become a man worthy of the Queen. Unfortunately, Ashara has never had any real interest or concern in him. Ethan looked at the frustrated and confused moon guards in front of him and couldn't help but feel sympathy. He knew that these warriors, once loyal to Ashara, were now facing the collapse of their faith and confusion about their future. "I know it's not easy for you to accept such a truth all at once," he said, taking the opportunity to suggest, "but you must rid yourselves of your blind worship of Ashara. Use your own eyes to witness the facts and find the true path." Ethan paused and continued, "Our goal is to go to the capital of Zinashari and join Lord Ravencrest's resistance. If we march overland with a large force, even if we travel non-stop, it will take at least more than a month to arrive. However, if you can provide the help of a transportation gate, we can greatly shorten the journey and reach the front line faster." Having said this, Ethan stood up and saluted Madrak and the others solemnly. "Here, as a member of the Moon Guard, I sincerely invite you to join us. Please follow us to the front line. Witness with your own eyes the atrocities of the Burning Legion and the betrayal of Ashara. I believe that as long as you bravely take this step, you will be able to find the truly correct path and discover your own faith and future." Chapter 6776, Archimonde. The heart of the Dark Knight Empire, the capital city Zinashari, was once bathed in endless prosperity and the glory of Ashara. Today, although its buildings remain tall and its streets wide, those who live here know that the city's prosperity is merely superficial. In reality, it is mired in misery. Under the iron heel of the Burning Legion, Zinashari's population has dropped by more than 60% compared to its previous peak. Innocent lower-class civilians have become the main victims of this catastrophe, their cries and whines drowned in the roar of the evil green flames. Whenever night falls, the blazing green fire ignited near the Well of Eternity dyes the entire sky in strange colors. The surviving civilians can only tremble and hide in their homes, praying that the devil's butcher's knife will not fall on them. In sharp contrast are the gorgeously dressed and arrogant upper-class elves who ignore the suffering of the lower classes. They walk the streets as usual, talking unscrupulously as if the chaos has nothing to do with them. Some are even satisfied, as the absence of the lower classes makes the streets more spacious and quieter than usual. Ashara's palace, located on a high platform not far away, used to be a symbol of joy and peace. Now, it is full of heaviness and depression. The turquoise-blue water of the Well of Eternity has turned into a heart-stopping, miserable green, and the wavy whirlpools rage on the water, mocking the beauty of the past. The most shocking sight is the huge evil energy portal beside the well. It is like an open door to hell, constantly spewing demons from the twisted void. A blue-skinned demon with octopus-like tentacles on his chin and recurved calves watched all this silently, as if admiring his own masterpiece. Every time a new demon stepped into Azeroth, he would smile with satisfaction. This city, this country, and this world have become their playthings, and the culprits of all this are the high-level elves and the queen they once regarded as a godlike existence, Ashara. Whoa! The air suddenly distorted as a portal of evil energy appeared out of thin air, not far in front of the blue-skinned demon, Archimonde the Defiler. Green light flashed inside the door, and a strong breath of evil energy rushed towards him. Immediately afterwards, a huge figure over 3 meters tall slowly walked out of the door. It was the leader of the Nathrazim, the fear demon Tichondrius. Tichondrius stepped out of the portal and immediately felt Archimonde's sharp, sword-like gaze. He did not dare to be negligent at all, and immediately knelt down on one knee, bowing his head and admitting his mistake. "Dear Lord Archimonde the Defiler, please forgive me. My mission failed." "Oh." Archimonde raised his eyebrows slightly, a look of surprise on his face. An evil smile appeared on his majestic face as he slowly said, "Tichondrius, you are Kil'jaeden's most capable lieutenant. He once promised me that you would play an important role in the destruction of Azeroth. I trusted him and trusted you, entrusting you with important tasks. But now, you have returned in such a state of embarrassment and told me that the mission failed?" "Sir, please listen to my explanation." Tichondrius felt the dissatisfaction in Archimonde's tone and sensed a hint of danger. He couldn't help but feel nervous and hurriedly lowered his head to defend himself. He recounted what had just happened and finally said, "I am willing to make amends. No matter what task you propose next time, I will guarantee my life to do my best to complete it for you." His voice was full of determination. He did not realize that Archimonde's eyes were not as angry as he had imagined. Instead, they flashed with satisfaction and amusement. Archimonde snorted coldly and said slowly, "That's fine. You said this yourself. Don't complain to Kil'jaeden that I've treated you badly." He paused and continued, "Go now. I will summon you again when needed." Hearing this, Tichondrius breathed a sigh of relief. He had temporarily escaped disaster, so he immediately and respectfully replied, "Yes, my lord." After saying that, he stood up, turned around, and walked towards the portal. In the Burning Legion, a vast and malevolent organization, factional strife was commonplace. From Kil'jaeden the Deceiver and Archimonde the Defiler at the top, to officers at all levels below, every member harbored ambitions and dreams of climbing over the corpses of their colleagues to ascend higher. This cruel competition and betrayal had long been the norm within the Burning Legion. Although Archimonde and Kil'jaeden were both recruited by the fallen titan Sargeras at the same time and became core members of the Burning Legion, their personalities and methods were completely different. Over tens of thousands of years working together, their differences became more pronounced, gradually forming an insurmountable gap. While they wouldn't openly break ranks in front of Sargeras, they would seize any opportunity to undermine each other. Archimonde, despite being a spellcaster, was tall and exuded a powerful evil energy. He respected power above all and believed that only power could decide everything. This was the fundamental reason he was the first to surrender when Sargeras demonstrated his might. He once controlled the Eridar Arcane Academy and was not lacking in wisdom, but since receiving the dark power bestowed by Sargeras, he had become increasingly reliant on brute strength. Whenever a problem could be solved with force, he would crush it with overwhelming power rather than think it through. Kil'jaeden the Deceiver was completely different from Archimonde. Slimmer and with a sinister face, his eyes gleamed with cunning. Although he also possessed great strength, Kil'jaeden preferred to hide behind the scenes, using conspiracies and tricks to manipulate his enemies. He excelled at manipulating people's hearts and creating conflicts, leading his enemies into carefully designed traps. The contrasting styles of Archimonde and Kil'jaeden not only reflected in their own actions, but also profoundly influenced the demons who served under them. This influence created a clear divide, splitting the villains into two distinct camps. Archimonde, who valued raw power, favored the simple-minded yet extremely brave Abyss Lords. These Abyss Lords, led by Melonos, won Archimonde's favor with their bravery and loyalty. Whether charging into battle or guarding the rear, they demonstrated unparalleled valor and dedication. Under Archimonde's command, the Abyss Lords swept across battlefields like a violent storm, striking terror into their enemies. Kil'jaeden, the cunning deceiver, preferred the Nathrazim, who excelled at manipulating hearts. These Nathrazim, with their cunning and unique shadow magic, became Kil'jaeden's powerful generals. They thrived on manipulating events from the shadows, plunging their enemies into confusion and suspicion. Under Kil'jaeden's command, the Nathrazim moved like ghosts in the darkness, silently eroding the enemy's will and defenses. Although Archimonde and Kil'jaeden maintained a superficial harmony in front of Sargeras, they often engaged in covert battles and undermined each other in private. They constantly sought opportunities to highlight their own brilliance while exposing the other's flaws. This atmosphere of intrigue and betrayal permeated the Burning Legion, making the entire organization even more chaotic and frenzied. However, both Archimonde and Kil'jaeden knew that their struggles and ambitions, in the presence of Sargeras, all others seemed insignificant. This fallen titan was the true master of the Burning Legion, his will and power surpassing all others. Only under his protection could they continue to expand their sphere of influence and realize their ambitions. Therefore, despite the differences between them, when facing common enemies and goals, they would temporarily set aside their grudges and work together to pave the way for the Burning Legion's conquest. The Vanguard mission of the invasion of Azeroth was entrusted by Sargeras to Archimonde, who was more active and brave in combat. Kil'jaeden stayed behind to provide support. However, the Deceiver was clearly unwilling to let his colleague take all the credit. When Archimonde led his troops into Azeroth, Kil'jaeden sent his confidant, Tichondrius, under the pretext of assisting Archimonde. Although Archimonde was dissatisfied with Kil'jaeden's arrangement, Tichondrius, who excelled at manipulating people's hearts, had always shown great respect for him. In previous missions, Tichondrius had also demonstrated outstanding abilities and impeccable execution, preventing Archimonde from finding an opportunity to undermine him. However, the failure of Tichondrius's mission presented Archimonde with a chance. He decided to assign a more challenging task next time to put the leader of the Dreadlords in his place and make him understand who the real number 2 in the Burning Legion was. But Archimonde slowly stroked the whiskers on his chin, falling into brief contemplation. Although this defiler admired strength, he was not a fool. He knew that Tichondrius, as Kil'jaeden's right-hand man, possessed exceptional abilities and wisdom. However, it was indeed beyond his expectation that such a powerful demon would falter in this seemingly weak world. The Sisters of Elune, and a strange druid, Archimonde murmured to himself. Mortals with fanatical beliefs are still as troublesome as ever. Chapter 677, Five-Colored Dragon, Sneeze. In the dense forest on the outskirts of Zin Ashari, Ethan suddenly sneezed without warning. He rubbed his sore nose, frowned slightly, and muttered to himself, "A cold? That's impossible. I'm in good health? Or is someone complaining about me?" Ethan looked around and saw towering old trees deep in the dense forest. The sun cast mottled light and shadows through the gaps in the treetops. In the distance, the noise of the battlefield was faintly heard. Not long ago, thanks to the help of the Moon Guard, the journey that was originally thousands of miles away became a short distance. The Moon Guards, proficient in the power of magic, only needed to find a magic network node to work together to build a large teleportation array. In this way, teams of hundreds of people passed through the teleportation array one after another, crossing the barriers of space and arriving near the capital of Zin Ashari. However, due to the chaos of the power of the Well of Eternity, this large-scale teleportation did not dare to get too close to the central area of Zin Ashari. They could only be teleported to the outskirts, dozens of miles away from the capital. But even so, standing here, Ethan could already see the battlefield situation from a distance. They had just experienced teleportation, and before they had time to adapt to the surrounding environment, they were deeply shocked by the spectacular scene on the battlefield in the distance. Everyone's eyes widened, trying to carve the unprecedented grand picture into their hearts. There has never been a time in history when so many dragons gathered together like today. In the sky, colorful dragons rose and gathered into a breathtaking and magnificent scenery. The red dragon, yellow dragon, and green dragon lined up in sequence, the light emitting from their bodies shining brightly, while the blue dragon and black dragon rushed higher into the sky, their vigorous figures drawing beautiful tracks in the sky. The 5 dragon tribes were now closely united to protect this land. Among the dragons, some spread their wings, covering the sky and the sun like moving mountain peaks, while others were slender, as small as gnats, shuttling flexibly through the air like streaks of lightning. Whether it was an old dragon who had experienced many vicissitudes of life or a young dragon who had just learned to fly, they all joined the team without hesitation. This was the order of the guardian dragons. They must fight for their homeland. However, the dragons that took off first did not immediately fly towards the elf kingdom. They hovered over the mountains, gliding around with the help of air currents, waiting for the arrival of their brothers and looking forward to fighting side by side. These dragons filled the sky, forming layers of queues from high to low to avoid collision with each other. These legendary behemoths continuously emerged from the depths of the ancient mountains. Faced with this scene, people could not help but feel a kind of apocalyptic despair. Perhaps this was a sign of the end of the world. However, the members of the Dragon Clan were well aware of the damage caused by demons to Azeroth. This threat was like a thorn in their throats, making them unable to sit idly by. The dragons were all excited, and they roared like thunder, shaking the entire sky. They were waiting, looking forward to the upcoming battle, which would be a battle about survival and glory. Finally, in the expectation of all the dragons, the guardian dragons appeared. The first to appear was the Lifebinder, the red dragon queen Alexstrasza, whose fiery dragon breath seemed to ignite the entire sky. Following her was the Spellweaver, the blue dragon king Malygos, whose deep blue eyes contained endless mysteries. Then came the Sleeper, the Lord of the Emerald Dream, the green dragon queen Ysera, who gently waved her wings, bringing up a dreamlike green. Only Nozdormu, the Lord of Time, did not appear, replaced by his eldest spouse. She appeared gracefully, and so, lemnly in front of everyone, greeted the Dragon Kings and conveyed the will of the Dragon of Time to them. After they gathered together, the black dragon Neltharion, the guardian of the earth, finally appeared. His huge body covered the sky and the sun, like a moving mountain peak. His appearance made everyone feel an indescribable sense of oppression, but at the same time, it also inspired the courage and fighting spirit deep in their hearts. "That dragon is really big," Tyrande remarked, looking at the majestic figure of the black dragon from a distance. Even though they were dozens of miles apart, Neltharion was still so conspicuous in their eyes, as if he were an insurmountable giant peak, which made people feel in awe. "You're right, Ethan," Tyrande said, subconsciously touching Ethan with her elbow, wanting to chat with him as usual. Then she noticed that Ethan's brows were furrowed, and his expression was one of deep concern. "What's wrong, Ethan?" Tyrande couldn't help but ask. "The dragon army really accepted the invitation and joined the battle as you expected. Isn't this good news? Why don't you look happy?" Ethan was silent for a moment. There were some things he really couldn't say. Of course, he couldn't tell Tyrande that Neltharion was not a good person. He would become as villainous as the devil in the future. At that time, he would even become more powerful and evil than he is now. And if Tyrande asked how he knew this, Ethan couldn't even tell her. He didn't want to lie to Tyrande, so Ethan could only reveal vaguely, I felt an ominous premonition." After that, Ethan ran forward without waiting for further questioning. The next moment, Tyrande was shocked to see that Ethan's body suddenly underwent earth-shaking changes. She was stunned for a second before she realized that Ethan was using the druid's signature ability, Wild Transformation. It wasn't like Tyrande had never seen Wild Transformation before. The reason why it took her some time to confirm was because compared to the druids she had seen, Ethan's transformation was so unusual that it was completely beyond her expectations. She had known Malfurion for a long time and considered herself to be one of the most familiar outsiders with the Night Elf druids, having experienced various transformations. But this was the first time she had discovered such a strange transformation. Other druids either transformed into giant bears, night sabers, wild cats, forest wolves, or transformed into giant eagles, storm crows, etc. They were all common beasts. The most bizarre transformation she had ever seen was a magical wildcat, but she had never seen anyone able to transform into a huge firebird. Tyrande did not know that in another 10,000 years, she would witness a group of flaming druids who could transform into fire eagles, fire cats, and fire scorpions. Of course, that is not the normal state of the druids, but the result of their surrender to the fire element Lord Ragnaros, and the form they took after gaining the power of the fire element. However, Ethan's transformation was different from those people. Ethan was certainly not low enough to seek refuge with Ragnaros, and his transformation was not comparable to that of an ordinary firebird, because he transformed into a phoenix. This is also the fastest of his several wilderness transformations. At this time, Ethan's entire body was wrapped in flames, and his feathers shone with blazing light, each piece seeming to be made of pure flames. Ethan certainly didn't make this choice lightly. When he saw Neltharion holding the dragon soul, an almost crazy idea suddenly emerged deep in his heart. Is it possible that history can be changed? He was familiar with the history of the War of the Ancients, and knew that in the next few minutes, Neltharion would make a shocking move, which... Ethan realized that he was standing at an important historical juncture, one that could affect the fate of the entire Azeroth in the future. There were ripples in his heart. If I can influence this, at this critical moment. This idea made him very excited, as he was already eager to try it. Although the aspect dragons all possessed demigod-level strength, Ethan was still full of confidence in himself. He believed that he had the ability to protect himself in front of the Earth Guardian, who had not yet transformed into Deathwing. It's worth the gamble, Ethan told himself. If he succeeded, history would change because of him. Even if he failed, he could still make a significant impact. It was important to note that whether it was the 5 aspect dragons, the emerging night elves such as Malfurion, Illidan, and Jared, or the wilderness demigods who had been paying attention to the battlefield, they were among the most important figures in Azeroth. By taking the initiative in this situation, Ethan would undoubtedly gain a lot of favor in front of them. With this alone, Ethan could at least gain a respectable reputation in Wyrmrest Temple. Without taking the time to explain to Tyrande, Ethan flew towards the dragons like a bolt of lightning. His figure drew a beautiful arc in the air, and he instantly disappeared from Tyrande's sight. "Ethan, where are you going?" Tyrande shouted anxiously. Seeing Ethan suddenly flying in the direction of the dragons, she felt a strong uneasiness in her heart. At this moment, she had no time to take care of the sisters in the sorority. She subconsciously mounted her hippogriff, followed closely, and flew quickly along the trail of flames left by Ethan. The priests of the Sisterhood and the Moon Guards witnessed this scene and were immediately confused. "What do you two want to do?" they shouted in confusion. They had teleported thousands of miles to the battlefield, and it was after listening to Tyrande and Ethan's advice that they decided to join the resistance. However, now the two leaders had run away inexplicably. How were they supposed to find Lord Ravencrest? Maiev reacted quickly and ordered decisively, "Madrak, you stay and take care of my sisters. I will go and get them back." Before she finished speaking, she also mounted her hippogriff and flew into the distance at high speed. Captain Madrak, who was left behind, sighed helplessly. Just 2 hours ago, they were at war with each other. Now, he was the protector of these priests of the Sisterhood of Elune. Should he say that these priests were big-hearted, or were they too impulsive? However, he knew that this was not the time to dwell on this. He must take responsibility and ensure the safety of these priests. Madrak looked around, quickly formulated a defense strategy, and comforted the somewhat panicked priests. Chapter 678, Dragon Soul. Ethan's feelings were more like prophecies than premonitions. Although the Dragon Legion had accepted invitations from the Red Dragon Crosses from the future, as well as Archdruid Malfurion and others, and resolutely joined the war against the Burning Legion, they were by no means blind creatures. As a race full of wisdom, the dragons naturally understood the terrifying power of the Burning Legion, and they would never step onto the battlefield unprepared. They had made careful preparations before deciding to participate in this war that was crucial to the survival of the world. They came prepared. Not only did they bring their own power, but they also brought an artifact that could change the course of the battle, the Dragon's Soul. Dragons are proud creatures, but under the leadership of the Dragon Kings, they were not controlled by their own arrogance. Coupled with the awakening of Crossus, the Red Dragon from the future, they were fully aware of the horror of the Burning Legion and made sufficient preparations in advance. The dragon soul was specially created by them to deal with demons. With the joint efforts of the 5 Dragon Kings, this artifact brought together part of their respective powers and contained unparalleled strength. The power of the 5 guardian dragons comes from the gift of the creation titan, and each power is unique and formidable. When these forces come together, they form an unrivaled power. As long as they could use the dragon soul correctly, they were confident they could deal a devastating blow to the demons. Of course, such power also had the characteristics of a double-edged sword. The dragon soul brought together the power of the dragons, so it also became their weakness. If this power was used against the dragons themselves, the effect would be equally disastrous. They had to be extremely careful when using this artifact. To ensure the safety of the dragon soul, it was solemnly handed over to Neltharion, who was recognized as the most powerful and reliable among the 5 Dragon Kings. Although this small talisman looked ordinary on the outside, when it shone with dazzling light in Neltharion's dragon claws, the brilliance was so captivating that every Dragon King present felt dizzy, unable to look away. Neltharion let out a thunderous roar, his voice full of majesty and power, causing the entire mountainous area to tremble. He spread his wings and flew high into the sky, followed by the dragons, forming a spectacular group. At this moment, their hearts were filled with determination and courage, ready for the upcoming battle. In order to create the most powerful weapon in history, the Dragon Soul, the 5 Dragon Kings dedicated their essence. Such behavior actually undermined their strength, but they still did it. After all, they knew that only by uniting as one could they fight against the most powerful enemy in history, the Burning Legion. If their strength wasn't enough, they also had sharp claws, sharp teeth, and other weapons to attack demons. They were fully prepared to defend their homeland at all costs. However, if all these efforts were not enough, then they really had no other choice. Under the leadership of Earth Guardian Neltharion, the dragons approached their target with lightning speed. The atmosphere of the battlefield filled the air, and they soared in the sky, nervously preparing for the upcoming battle. At this time, the sky above the battlefield was filled with clouds and fog, and visibility was very low, like a chaotic world. The demons had noticed the arrival of these powerful new opponents. To avoid fatal strikes from the air, the Eridar mages among the demons quickly cast the fog of war. This thick fog tried to obscure the dragons' sight, confuse their senses, and make them lose their way in this chaos. However, their trick was easily solved by Neltharion, and the dragons were not trapped by the mists. Neltharion led them to fly at a low altitude. The magic power of the dragon soul bloomed with dazzling light in his hand, bursting out with powerful magic like a beacon, instantly dispelling the surrounding fog and guiding the dragons. This was the first time the dragon soul had played a role on the battlefield. Seeing Neltharion break the enemy's war magic with a wave of his hand, Alexstrasza, the Red Dragon Queen, and the other aspect dragons were shocked. They were all captivated by the talisman's magic power, finally convinced that they had indeed created a masterpiece of unparalleled power. Victory seemed within reach. Neltharion flew in the air, his mind filled with whispers that had troubled him for a long time. If it were an ordinary dragon, these whispers, full of temptation and curses, would have driven him mad. But Neltharion seemed to remain sober. If Ethan could hear these whispers, he would surely recognize them as the historical culprit responsible for Neltharion's downfall. Almost there! Almost there! The voices echoed seductively in his ears. Soon! Soon! They seemed confident in their upcoming victory. Driven by this confidence, Neltharion envisioned everyone bowing before him. Suddenly, a voice from behind interrupted his thoughts. Neltharion, what do you want us to do? The speaker was the Red Dragon Queen, Alexstrasza, asking the Black Dragon King about his next plan. I hope you give me your life. Neltharion felt an inexplicable restlessness in his heart. He longed to control the lives of the dragons and make them his slaves. However, he knew he could not reveal any flaws at this moment. Taking a deep breath, he suppressed his inner desires temporarily. He turned around, faced the Red Dragon Queen and the other guardian dragons, and said, I have set up the formation. I hope everyone can take their positions according to my instructions. Leave the rest to the Dragon Soul. Alexstrasza frowned slightly, not completely satisfied with Neltharion's answer. "Is it that simple?" she asked. "Don't we need to attack the devil directly? I want you to bow to me easily." Neltharion sneered secretly in his heart, but outwardly he remained calm and reassured her. "Yes, it's that simple." He tried to make his voice sound more sincere and credible. Alexstrasza said nothing more, which made Neltharion secretly relieved. He knew his mind had begun to lose control. If the Red Dragon Queen asked a few more questions, he might not be able to conceal his inner desires. The dragon soul, his dragon soul, continued to function under Neltharion's control, dispelling the fog from the battlefield. Neltharion looked down and saw countless demons swarming on the ground like ants, filling the land with evil and chaos. "We have arrived at the battlefield," Neltharion's voice echoed in the air, revealing an uncontrollable excitement. He felt the joy and satisfaction brought by the coming victory, as if the whole world was already under his control. Patience. The voices sounded in his mind again, like a curse that surrounded him without respite. Patience. They seemed to be warning him that this was not the time to relax his vigilance. Yes, patience. Neltharion took a deep breath and suppressed the restlessness in his heart. He knew that for the sake of the rich reward and the coming victory, a few minutes of patience would be nothing at all. He had the ability to wait for the best time and take everything into his own hands. Archimonde, the overlord of the abyss, almost never allowed panic to invade his mind. He always handled the complicated affairs of the world with extraordinary rationality. Whether it was the night elves, the intricate and unfathomable magical knowledge, or even the rumored secret escape of the Sisters of Elune, Archimonde prided himself on dealing with situations with a cool head and iron resolve. In his perception, the world was like a vast chessboard, and he was the player controlling all the pieces. Everything was under his command. However, at this moment, rare waves of emotion stirred within him. He widened his eyes, staring at the enormous figure gradually approaching in the sky, feeling an indescribable shock. He had never imagined that the Dragon Clan would intervene in the affairs of this world on such a grand scale. In his impression, those proud dragons had long distanced themselves from worldly disputes. Even if the world were to break apart and doomsday arrived, they would hide in their dragon lairs, oblivious to it all. Of course, he knew that some dragons were different, caring about the fate of the world and interfering in mortal affairs. For these potential variables, Archimonde had made thorough preparations. He had deployed countless doomsday guards, hidden in the thick fog, waiting for any dragons that might appear. But now, the scene before him was completely beyond his expectations. The enormous dragon shadows circling and flying in the sky were far more numerous and formidable than Archimonde had imagined. He felt overwhelmed by these majestic creatures. Not only were they superior in strategy, but they were also terrifyingly cautious. They had all come. Archimonde frowned, an unprecedented sense of frustration surging in his heart. He realized that he might have made a fatal mistake. The situation he had thought he could easily control now seemed full of countless variables and unknowns. The intervention of these dragons would undoubtedly bring more complicated and unpredictable results to this war. However, the demon commander quickly regained his composure after a brief moment of shock. He knew very well that at this decisive moment, Lord Sargeras would never allow anything to go wrong. With Sargeras's guarantee, they were not in a desperate situation. So he closed his eyes, extending his consciousness like a tentacle, and established a close spiritual link with every Eridar and Fearlord on the battlefield. "Listen to my order." Archimonde's voice resonated in every demon's mind, clear and powerful. "Turn your magic attacks on the approaching dragons. Let them taste the power of the Burning Legion." Following Archimonde's command, the demons on the battlefield adjusted their attack directions. Streams of blazing flames, icy frost, and sharp shadow arrows poured out like torrential rain, piercing the sky and roaring towards the dragons. Chapter 679, Counterattack Moment. Archimonde stood high, overlooking the entire battlefield with an arrogant smile on his tentacled face. He was confident that the evil spells of the Burning Legion were invincible and would be enough to destroy these dragons who dared to interfere in their affairs. In his opinion, these dragons were merely creatures of the mortal world. Their power would eventually be bound and limited by the laws of nature, and the burning legion from the twisting void was enough to crush them. At the same time, Nathrazim and the wizards joined the battle under Archimonde's command. They waved their staffs and magic wands, chanted ancient Eridar spells, and released powerful magical energy. These energies converged into dazzling beams of light and huge whirlpools, surrounding the dragons, constantly weakening their defenses and lives. Archimonde felt even more proud as he watched the dragons gradually fall into trouble under the onslaught of the burning legion. He sneered and thought, "Yes, nothing can stop my great victory. Not even the Dragon Clan." His eyes were full of contempt for his enemy. In this seemingly disparate battle, he seemed to have already seen the glorious moment when he stood atop victory. However, the demon's prolonged attack failed to achieve its goal. Under Neltharion's skillful command, the dragon troops showed unparalleled strength and unity. To balance the overall power and fully utilize the characteristics of each tribe, the dragons were intertwined according to different colors, forming a colorful rainbow across the sky, lined up solemnly and orderly. Next to Neltharion, Alexstrasza, the Red Dragon Queen, Ysera, the Green Dragon Queen, Malygos, the Blue Dragon King, and the consort of the Bronze Dragon Nosdormu flew side by side. If Neltharion looked at the Red Dragon, he would see Alexstrasza looking around, as if searching for something. However, Neltharion was so deep in his madness that he did not realize there was a missing dragon, one of the Red Dragons. Young Cleostras did not appear in the queue. Viewed from a high altitude, those tiny creatures began to watch the approaching dragon troops in horror. They were as insignificant as ants, but they used all their strength to launch colorful magic attacks, trying to block this unstoppable torrent. A sinister smile flashed across the corner of Neltharion's mouth, and his reptile-like face revealed sharp teeth. His audience, friends and foes alike, held their breath, preparing to witness this historic moment. "Now," Neltharion said in a low and majestic voice, "let the enemies on the ground see the power of the dragon's soul." As soon as he finished speaking, Neltharion spat out a string of mysterious dragon language, and then this small talisman suddenly burst out with a dazzling light. A large amount of energy gathered from the dragons into the dragon soul, and soon its brightness exceeded the endurance limit of all creatures present. Except for Neltharion, the guardian of the earth, the other dragons closed their eyes in pain, unable to look directly at the dazzling light. However, for Neltharion, this dazzling light had an extraordinary attraction, so much so that tears flowed from the corners of his eyes, and he was still deeply intoxicated and unable to extricate himself. As the light of the talisman reached its peak, the dragon soul finally began its attack. It gathered the endless power and anger of the dragon clan and shot out a pure golden light. The purity of this golden light surpassed the brilliance of the sun, stars, and moon. When it came into contact with attacks from demons, those dark evil spells were instantly swallowed up by the golden light. Their power seemed so insignificant in front of the golden light that they even aroused a stronger reaction from it. What happened next shocked and horrified all who witnessed it. That terrifying golden light was like a world-destroying sharp blade, sweeping downwards and penetrating the array of demon troops. Any demon touched by the golden light was instantly obliterated, disappearing into the air without even having time to scream. The demons appeared helpless and vulnerable in the face of this golden light. They howled, screamed, and ran in all directions, desperately trying to avoid the fatal illumination. For the first time, they exhibited such embarrassment and fear before an enemy. Even when facing the powerful Night Elf army, they had never felt this way. Now, they truly experienced the taste of fear, a deep-seated feeling of despair and powerlessness. At the beginning, the elven rebels watched the scene with awe and shock in their eyes. The sight before them left them speechless. Song Neng stood quietly, like a stone sculpture. Even the most arrogant and proud elves among the nobles were dumbfounded, staring at the majestic energy pouring out of the talisman. This power was so immense that it gave them an illusion. Compared to the power of the Well of Eternity they controlled, this energy was undoubtedly much more powerful, making them feel small and powerless. The crowd of rebels cheered, but the time traveler Luo Ning kept shaking his head, repeatedly chanting, "No, no." His eyes were full of despair and helplessness because, from the demon's tragic situation, he had already foreseen the coming disaster. Farther away, Illidan stared intently at this spectacular massacre, his heart filled with envy and longing. He felt that the magic and combat skills he had learned throughout his life were insignificant compared to this power. He realized how ignorant and ridiculous his arrogance was in the face of the power controlled by the dragons. On the other side of the battlefield, the atmosphere was so tense it felt like the air was freezing. Archimonde stood there, his brows furrowed like two dark clouds pressing on his forehead, his eyes gloomy, swallowing up all the light around him like an abyss. In the face of that unrivaled force, his army, once hailed as invincible, was now like leaves in the autumn wind, collapsing at the first touch. Archimonde could feel the malice surging behind him, the anger from Sargeras rolling in his heart like lava. He knew very well what consequences this failure would bring. Manaroth and the highborn elves might have been able to escape, but as the commander of the Burning Legion, he was destined to pay a heavy price for the defeat of this war. The Burning Legion did fight back, but to no avail. Both the Eridar and Nathrazim targeted the rune and its creator. They tried to burn the dragon soul with dark flames, attempting to peel off Neltharion's skin piece by piece and penetrate deep into his flesh and blood until they touched his bones. Their attack was not only aimed at Neltharion, but also affected all dragons. However, the brilliance of the talisman did not dim. On the contrary, under the impact of dark magic, it was aroused with a stronger will to resist, and the light bloomed even more dazzlingly. "It's time!" Earth Guardian Neltharion roared, his voice exploding in the air like thunder, unable to suppress the fanatical thoughts in his heart. He waved his huge claws and ordered, "Set up the magic matrix." The dragons obeyed his command, closely linking their consciousness and power. They had previously established a deep connection with the rune through devotion, and now it was not difficult to add another layer of strength to it. Each dragon felt the other's presence, and their power gathered into a huge torrent, preparing for the coming impact. Neltharion roared mockingly, aiming at the attacking demon wizards, preparing to release the power of the talisman. Following his command, another stream of hot golden light spurted out from the talisman and violently returned towards the demon masters. Under the baptism of golden light, the groups of Eridar mages were as helpless as fragile straws. The magic they were once proud of seemed so insignificant in the face of this power, and they didn't even have time to react before being consumed by the light. In an instant, they turned to dust and dissipated into the air. Simultaneously, the golden light pierced through the bodies of the fear demons flying above like fiery arrows. Their wails echoed, but were soon drowned out by the overwhelming golden light. Under this force, their bodies were reduced to white bones, falling to the ground like broken kites. Elsewhere, wizards attempted to cast spells to resist the golden torrent, but their efforts were futile. The power of the talisman reflected their magic, taking their lives in various horrific ways. Some wizards were backlashed by their own spells, their bodies twisting in pain. Others were instantly swallowed by the golden light, without even a chance to struggle. Finally, even the most ferocious demons began to flee in panic. Once fearless, they now resembled bereaved dogs, unable to compete with this force. Not even their fear of Sargeras could halt their retreat. The entire battlefield was dominated by the power of the Dragon Clan, and the demons appeared small and powerless in the golden light. When the Felguard, Doomguard, and other demons saw how vulnerable their brethren were to the dragons, their last remnants of courage evaporated. Archimonde stood on the battlefield, watching the demons flee in all directions, feeling both angry and helpless. As the leader of the demons, he found himself a commander without anyone to command. Even though he killed several escaping demons around him as a warning, no one paid attention to his threats. In the eyes of the demons, the battle was over, and victory belonged to the dragons and their talismans. At the same time, the Resistance army finally recovered from the shock and responded to the earth-shaking situation. The leader of the Resistance army, Lord Ravencrest, rode on his loyal lightsaber, staring at the retreating demons with burning eyes. He raised his sword and shouted loudly, "The time has come! Fight for Kalimdor and Azshara!" His voice echoed among the rebels like a war drum, stirring the blood and courage deep in the hearts of the soldiers. Under his call, the elven army surged forward like a raging tide, chasing the fleeing demons. After such a long war, they had endured countless sufferings and sacrifices, but at this moment, the hope of victory finally burned in their hearts. The demons were in a panic under their pursuit. Some were killed directly on the battlefield, while others trampled each other in their haste to escape. Lord Ravencrest led the charge, his lightsaber galloping like the wind across the battlefield. With every charge, he and his elven warriors broke through the demons' defenses. His presence became a symbol for the resistance army, inspiring the warriors to keep moving forward and fighting. Chapter 680, Neltharion's Rebellion. Neltharion spread his wings and soared through the sky, watching the weak demons flee in all directions. His heart swelled with pride. He had proven to everyone the strength of his dragon soul, as well as his own nobility. This power, this glory, belonged to him alone, and no one else could share in it. However, just as he was reveling in his great victory, a voice he had anticipated would oppose him sooner or later shattered his joy. It was Alexstrasza. Her voice sounded tired, as too much power had been drawn by the dragon soul. "Neltharion!" Alexstrasza shouted. "The demons have been defeated. The dragon soul has done a great job. Now it is time for us to remove the magic matrix and launch an all-out attack. We cannot let the demons have a chance to breathe. We must work together to eliminate them completely." "No." Neltharion glared at her, his anger palpable. He could no longer hide his mad thoughts and roared loudly. "No, from now on, I will decide what to do. Yes, I alone will decide everything. Not you, Alexstrasza." His voice echoed in the sky, shocking the other dragon guardians. They all turned their attention to the Earth Guardian, as if seeing him for the first time, especially Malygos, who was puzzled and wanted to reason with the Black Dragon. "My good friend Neltharion," Malygos said, "she doesn't disrespect you. It's just that our attack will be more effective that way. If we pursue the victory together now and hunt down the demons, we can quickly expand the results, and victory will belong to us even more." Why did you reject her suggestion? However, Neltharion could no longer listen to anyone. He sneered and said, "I don't need your understanding, nor your support. As long as I have the dragon soul in my hand, it will be enough to make the world tremble." Immediately afterward, he began to activate the dragon language magic again. The talisman began to flash, emitting a strange and powerful light. But unlike the previous attacks, this time, the power of the talisman was not directed at the terrifying demons, but turned towards the dragons themselves. This change shocked and puzzled all the dragons. The gathered dragons were immobilized by an invisible force. Their wings were half opened, but they did not fall due to loss of balance. The dragon soul drew terrible power from them and used it against themselves, freezing them in midair and rendering them unable to move. Their eyes were the only sign that they were still conscious, revealing various emotions. Except for the black dragons, the other dragons all had a look of fear in their eyes. They couldn't believe that one of the most powerful members of their tribe would betray them and turn this terrifying power against them. At this moment, their unity and trust were completely broken, leaving only helplessness and fear. "Don't betray me!" Neltharion roared angrily. He seemed crazed, his heart full of a desire for power. "I will exercise my power. My ideal is about to come true. This land, all lands, will yield to my power. I will reconstruct this world the way it should be." His terrifying gaze turned to the battlefield, but he did not look at the defeated burning legion. He held the golden talisman tightly in his hand and hissed at the advancing night elf army. "Let everyone see. I can decide their fate." The dragon soul began to seek its next sacrifice. Its mana was aimed at the elven defenders, golden light jumping in the air, carrying the breath of destruction, and fired for the third time. The elves, who had originally seen victory in sight, thought that victory was certain. Who would have thought that the situation would turn upside down, plunging them into the abyss of despair? Their mood, immersed in joy, was instantly shattered by the cold reality. Faced with this irresistible force, they had no chance to resist. A ray of golden light swept across the front row of the elf front with lightning speed, and those brave warriors disappeared in an instant. Were once a noble dragon, a protector of this world. But now, look at what you have become. You are the one who has betrayed us all, not the other way around. Neltharion's rage intensified, his eyes blazing with fury. Silence! You know nothing of what I have endured, the whispers that have tormented me, the power that I now wield. I am the true ruler of this world, and you will all bow before me. Alexstrasza's voice softened, filled with sorrow. Neltharion, the power you wield is corrupting you. It is not too late to turn back, to seek redemption. We can help you, but you must let go of this madness. For a moment, a flicker of doubt crossed Neltharion's face, but it was quickly replaced by a sneer. Redemption? Help? I need none of that. I have the dragon soul, and with it, I am invincible. You are the ones who need saving, not me. The battlefield was silent, the tension palpable. The elves and demons, once fierce enemies, now shared a common fear. They watched the exchange between the two dragons, their fates hanging in the balance. Neltharion's voice boomed once more. This is your final chance. Kneel before me, or face annihilation. The remaining forces, seeing no other option, slowly sank to their knees, their spirits broken. Neltharion's laughter echoed across the battlefield, a chilling sound that sent shivers down the spines of all who heard it. But Alexstrasza was not done. With a determined look, she spoke again. Neltharion, you may have the power now, but remember this. True strength comes from unity, from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. You have lost sight of that, and it will be your downfall. Neltharion's eyes narrowed, his patience wearing thin. Enough. I will hear no more of your lies. Prepare to meet your end, Alexstrasza. As he prepared to unleash his power, a sudden flash of light interrupted him. Ethan Levine, a young wizard who had been observing the battle from a distance, stepped forward. His presence was unexpected, and all eyes turned to him. Ethan, Alexstrasza whispered, recognizing the young wizard's potential. Ethan raised his wand, his voice steady and clear. Neltharion, your reign of terror ends here. You have forgotten what it means to be a true leader, a true protector. It is time for you to face the consequences of your actions. Neltharion laughed, a deep, menacing sound. And who are you to challenge me, little wizard? Ethan's eyes blazed with determination. I am Ethan Levine, and I will not stand by while you destroy everything we hold dear. With those words, a fierce battle ensued. Ethan's magic clashed with Neltharion's power, the air crackling with energy. The young wizard fought with all his might, his determination unwavering. As the battle raged on, the whispers in Neltharion's mind grew louder, urging him to destroy his opponent. But Ethan's resolve was stronger, his heart filled with the hope of saving his world. In a final, desperate move, Ethan channeled all his magic into a single powerful spell. The force of it struck Neltharion, breaking through his defenses and shattering the dragon's soul. Neltharion roared in agony, his power waning. The whispers in his mind faded, replaced by a crushing silence. He fell to the ground, defeated. The battlefield was still, the silence deafening. The elves and demons slowly rose to their feet, their fear replaced by a cautious hope. Alexstrasza approached Ethan, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Ethan. You have done what we could not. You have saved us all. Ethan nodded, his exhaustion evident. It was not just me, it was all of us, standing together. As the sun began to rise, the battlefield was bathed in a warm, golden light. The war was over, and a new era of peace and unity had begun. You betrayed us all. You broke the oath of the Guardian and used the power of the dragon's soul for evil purposes. You are the real traitor. Her voice was resolute, each word a dagger aimed at Neltharion's heart. None of us has ever committed a more terrible crime than you. These words struck Neltharion deeply. Alexstrasza's tone and softened, a gentle attempt to reach his inner conscience. Neltharion, this isn't you. You always wanted this world to be peaceful and harmonious.